and pull the second matron that's patrolling on either the left or the right, depending on which way they go down. But Nerfclap actually grabbing a lot of the ticks on the side right now, and a really dangerous pull coming up here because we are back in that bursting affix along with the explosive.
Yep, we got double bursting basically from the ticks, because the ticks, whenever they do end up dying, they end up dropping the group incredibly low. Plus, you do end up getting a 6 stack of that bursting here. They do a really good job of being patient, not rolling that bursting stack in order to give them a 7, forcing JB to end up popping even more cooldowns, or maybe end up people dying. On the side of 40K, we do see maybe a little bit more conservative pull, not pulling the ticks into the pack, while Method NA is making very quick work of their first pull here.
Certainly no DPS braining available for Method NA here, as all of them are quite patient. Heals through the 5 stacks of bursting. What are you looking at?
What are you trying to say, DPS brain?
Heals through the 5 stack of bursting, of course, and heads down to the matron. They do CC or crowd control with a paralyze the first Blood Priest there and bring everything back down along with this mask. Now, this mask has also caused some problems before. If you miss the Dark Reconstitution cast from the Blood Priest, it will heal whatever they target back up to full health. So very important to get an interrupt on that, along with as many interrupts on the Blood Bolts as you can. Lofus finally proccing his cheat death as well, as he was trapped in one of the nets from the Headhunters too. Lots of residual damage on the group, which is just so scary for the healers.
Yeah, as you actually did see one of the priests that looks like paralysis off to the side there, he ended up spawning an explosive orb on him just because he is actually in combat. None of the members of 40K turned off of the mobs that they were DPSing in order to be able to kill that explosive, and Lofus ends up paying for it with just his cheat death, which actually seems like a decent trade overall. But yeah, him being stuck in that net ended up getting him very low, as Method NA has proc their first reaping of the instance, jumping into Elderly Axa, and Nerf ending up spell reflecting that first Blood Bolt back into her.
Yeah, really good of them to just aggressively move into her as the RP spawning for the first reaping happens, because it allows the Prot Warrior to get that spell reflect right into Elderly Axa right away instead of consuming it on one of the Reaping Soul stacks or not. But one of the casts actually leaking through there, either that or a heavy dot stack. But Nerfclap getting down to 20%, immediate healing coming up from JB and the rest of the team as Shakib eats one of the shadow smashes to the face, meaning he has 20% decreased health. Too many tacos. 20% decreased health for a minute. Now, that really shouldn't matter too much for the DPS on this fight. There's barely any residual damage. In fact, there is none. All of it is avoidable damage. So if you get hit by anything, you've been standing in bad for sure.
Yeah, and here comes the reaping in for 40K, as both teams have elected to use Bloodlust as soon as they end up pulling Elderly Axa in order to be able to get super efficient cleave on the Blood Effigy, all the reaping, and Elderly Axa, because this is actually kind of a scary pull just because of how long this reaping ends up being alive. Your tank doesn't have the option to be able to spell reflect the Blood Bolt back to the Elderly Axa or the Blood Effigy if there is too many reaping mobs hitting him. So making sure that you are dealing with them very quickly, or dropping like a Ring of Peace or an Ursul's Vortex in order to allow the tank to get separation from the reaping mobs whenever you are looking to pop that spell reflect whenever the reaping is up is very important, as Elderly Axa is looking to go down here on the side of Method NA.
Yeah, it's just so crucial because it's about half the health of the Blood Effigy, a huge chunk of damage, I think 5-7%, something like that on Elderly Axa as well. So definitely want to play around that 25-second cooldown on the spell reflect. Method NA have indeed downed the first boss, have shadow melted, and are heading over to their arch nemesis, the Kragmaw room here, where they usually make quite significant pulls, but something always ends up just going wrong for them. There's an explosive untended in the back, a bit too much damage goes up from the Bloodseeker, somebody misses an interrupt on the Lasher. So there's just so many things for these teams to really pay attention to, and Method NA has not been able to sneak by, but 40K with troubles of their own as Rentari goes down on the right side right now. Immediate battle res coming up from Igloo, and Elderly Axa down to 1%. You know, I think I would have taken the gamble there. Liaxa was at 6% and not used your battle res and just res them right after. The boss was obviously going to die, tank or not.
It depends on where you really think that you're actually going to end up gaining time. Like if you're playing to anticipate like you actually maybe needing the battle res in this Kragmaw room, then yeah, I think you might be right, because Lighty does actually end up going down on the side of Method NA, like I said. So you might end up end up needing that battle res, like you were stating. So you don't actually know if it will end up being necessary, but being hesitant with it is definitely something that you don't end up wanting to do. 40K elects to use it there, and if Lighty goes down again,
the curse starting to continue here for Method NA. As Lighty goes down, they use the battle res, goes down again, and an explosive goes off in the back, and the team is just getting hammered with bursting stacks right now as they kill the rest of the trash off. JB having such a struggle healing the rest of the group up, but finally they manage to recover, but they will not be able to res Lighty until they finish off the rest of the mobs that are in contact with them. There is an explosive on the side as well that I don't think JB managed to get to, so they're kind of trying to run away from it right now. It seems somebody was able to finally tag it. They do need to, they actually ended up shadow melding off, getting out of combat with that maggot that they tagged on the side in order to be able to res Lighty. So a bit of a slowdown here for Method as well. 2 deaths on the board. Neither team has their battle res available as 40K rears up for a fairly large pull that is going to spawn their second reaping.
Yeah, that's actually super good by JB, using his shadow meld and just having the presence of mind in order to be able to get out of combat there, res Lighty up. They were kind of patient because they probably wanted to pull that maggot and kind of chain it into some more trash, but they were just a little bit patient with it, and they were like, all right, well, we have to res him, we have to shadow meld out of combat here, as Wolf Disco drops incredibly low for 40K.
Yeah, both rogues right now fixated by one of the Blood Swarmers. Definitely the most dangerous mob in this room right now. It fixates a player. Tank can't really help with anything outside of trying to peel, and just any kind of external that could be put on the 2 rogues right now helps a lot. Pure shadow damage coming in, and just a ton of it too. So any kind of extra residual damage on top of that, getting hit by the pool on the ground, and explosive going off is just so dangerous. As we can see, Wolf Disco had indeed proc that cheat death there. Method still kind of chiseling through everything, using their second reaping to pull it on top of some more trash. Defensive Ring of Peace coming down for Nerf Clap as Lighty takes a bit of extra damage from all the residual mobs in the corner. But 40K looks like they're in quite a bit of trouble here as Lizelle goes down. They don't have the battle res available, and Rentari quite low as well, but they should be able to finish up the rest of this group and res Lizelle. The Windwalkers having a lot of trouble right now, both of them on both sides.
Yeah, this is the Feral Bloodswarmer is actually really challenging, especially whenever you're pairing it with a bunch of Disease Lashers. So you end up needing melee kicks for these Disease Lasher casts, and the reason for that being is that if the cast does in fact get off, then we'll end up stunning you for prolonged periods of time. It looks like Lizelle ended up releasing.
Yeah, I mean, well, they do have a clear path back, but I guess they just wanted to release while they kept going at more trash. They did spawn their reaping, so they might not have been able to get their res on as quickly as they would like. They got back in combat, so he really had no choice outside of just waiting until they dealt with the reaping and then running back, which he should be back in time by the time they're done this trash here. Method has already pulled Kragmaw, so traditionally, or at least historically throughout this cup, we've seen teams proc their third reaping and then pull that on top of Kragmaw, but Method kind of jumping the gun a bit. I don't think they have enough there. Oh, they do. They have a maggot on the side there, so they can have enough trash to proc their reaping during the Kragmaw encounter, but the first Tantrum should be procking on their team soon. Nerf Clap getting healed up to full, and JB is going to have his hands full in just a moment here.
Yeah, they actually have multiple Bloodswarmers CC'd out on the side of the room, plus that maggot paralysis, so they're kind of waiting. This is actually kind of scary on the side of Method because if you actually do have to get too close to that paralysis mob, then you're going to end up spawning explosives because you're going to end up putting that maggot in combat because, as we've talked about before, paralysis is not a true CC, meaning that it won't keep mobs out of combat, where stuff like Sap or Imprison will.
Yeah, Crag, you know, you're absolutely right, but I think they might be using that at some point during the boss to proc their third reaping on top of it. The Bloodstormers, I'm pretty sure they're just going to shadow meld as soon as Kragmaw's done. We'll see. Here comes the maggot right now, indeed. So they have pulled it in on top of the boss and are looking to cleave it down and proc that reaping likely after the next tantrum or just as the tantrum ends. Group running around and stomping the ticks from the that all spawned from the 3 abilities from Kragmaw, and we do know, of course, 3 or 4 of them had spawned after that tantrum, so just making Nerf's life just a bit harder on JB's as well, because when they explode for that shadow damage, and they add a stacking damage over time to the tank. Nerf Clap getting a bit low here from the maggot. They have to be really good to interrupt the maggot while the rest of the team is running around here stomping. It takes a couple spawn, unfortunately, for them, as 40K has spawned their third reaping and has started on Kragmaw as well at 90%.
Yep. Dealing with that maggot, Method NA finally gets their third reaping of the instance, as 2 ticks are still hitting Nerf, which is actually kind of scary. 2 ticks isn't like the worst possible thing, but the fact that they're not able to like run across the room because those mobs are blinded and will eventually put them in combat if they do cross the room there because those blood swarmers is actually just kind of scary. So they ended up electing to just spawn a couple ticks. You end up like Ursul's vortexing or stunning them off Nerf, as they have dealt with their third reaping very quickly on the side of Method NA.
Yeah, very quick indeed, and also very well timed, making sure that it's between those tantrum waves. You certainly don't want a bunch of reaping running around during a tantrum. You could see just how hard it damages the group and how much attention is needed from the healers doing this whilst the rest of the group is running all over the map. Good luck getting anybody in Efflorences during that, as they make sure to stomp the ticks out. Nerf Clap back in position here, getting ready to dodge that first indigestion whenever it may come, either by heroic leaping or just running out quickly and charging back in. But first, we have a charge target on the players. They make sure to stomp the ticks, and the indigestion should be next on the tank on Nerf Clap on Method NA side. 40K still holding their own, but they are 40% behind on the boss at this point, and the deaths are completely even as well. So Method NA is just pulled ahead, but lots that can go wrong in the next part of the map before Sporecaller Zancha. Yeah,
we've actually seen a lot of wipes to the Defilers and stuff like that in front of Sporecaller Zancha. As we do actually see on the side of Method NA, Kragmaw's down to 5%. They're actually trying to skip this this tantrum as very quickly as possible, because getting another tantrum forces you to end up stomping on all the ticks that are on the ground. But Kragmaw does end up going down right as that tantrum ends up starting, whereas Whereas on the side of 40K, Kragmaw is hitting 40% here.
Yeah, that was pretty close for Method and A. I mean, they were all in there, and it worked out for them. Here comes the Mass Stealth right now as they get past the first Nope Rope right into the Guardian pack at the bottom. Looks like they'll be pulling the Death Speaker Defiler on the left along with the Death Speaker Guardian pack. Yoda seemed to have gotten clipped by something, though, and procced his cheat death on the way in. Probably got melee, did not get that Trix up too early. But there is, of course, a Bloodstormer in there that they pulled from the sky. They do kind of float around on the side area after the second boss, Kragmaw. It's fixated right now on the Windwalker Lighty, so it will refixate in a moment. They're probably prioritizing that down as quickly as possible while maintaining a 2-interrupt rotation on that Defiler.
That's actually unfortunate because that Ring of Peace does go out as soon as that Spirit Drain Totem does end up going out. All of the whole entire group ending up moving out of it as they do get bursting stacks and the group dropping incredibly low, but they end up dealing with the pack really well, making sure that they do get kicks where they're needed here.
And the Hazard Spaghetti number 2 pulled here for Method and A as they drag the remaining Guardians over, easily cleaving them down, and doing a really good job here, Titles, of separating those bursting stacks and making sure that nothing too crazy is happening on the group right now and making JB's life just a bit easier so he can contribute to some of the damage right now on this horror. 40K has down Kragmaw, is now moving on to the same trash while Method and A is rearing up to pull these 2 Defilers on top of Sporecaller Zancho. We see that heroic leap in here for Nerf Clap as they get started on the third boss. Defilers need, as I mentioned, 2 interrupts babysitting at all times for them, for both the Withering Curse and, of course, the Shadow Bolt AoE volley on the group. Outside of that, just move out of the totems. We do know they could be kind of misplaced in a bad spot sometimes, and when the tank needs to direct the shockwave from frontal from the boss and the mushrooms, but it should be no problem with the amount of not only immunes, pre-immunes that they have in the group, but both teams also have a monk present. So these mushrooms do indeed put a disease on you, but you can run through them on purpose and have Lighty or, of course, Lizelle on 40K's side dispel you when it gets too bad.
Yep, and the 2 Defilers go down on the side of Method and A, making this pull incredibly safe here. Now they just have the upheaval on them. They need to get a couple more mushrooms before using their cloak in order to be able to soak the last couple mushrooms, as you do see Shakib there grabbing them as that Festering Harvest cast does start. Method and A has procced their 4th Reaping of the Instance on top of Sporecaller Zancha, and then just DPSing it down very evenly. They have elected to not use their Bloodlust here on Sporecaller Zancha, which I actually think is pretty good from them.
Yeah, no surprise. We know from them usually they pull the final Reaping Wave on top of Unbound Abomination, the 4th and final boss of the instance, and go from there. Just 1 mushroom dot on Yoda as it ticks off. No problem for JB as they heal through it. Sporecaller Zancha now down to 60%, has done their first Festering Harvest and are progressing well on the boss, dodging all of these evil balls to the face that would not really do that much damage, but add the dot on you that could start to spiral out of control later in the dungeon. So players doing well to avoid that as the 2 rogues run out with their upheavals to eliminate any remaining fungi on the side of the room.
Yep. Fungi aside, we have seen 40K pulling Sporecaller Zancha as well with those Defilers, making sure that they do continue to get kicks on those Withering Curses and those Shadow Bolt volleys, because those going off would actually be very scary. We see Lizelle and Lufus each getting 1 stack of the mushroom. Lizelle probably not having the Dispel available to him right there, otherwise he would have just dispelled those 2 odd mushroom stacks. But on 40K, they're making sure that they do get those mobs killed, and they have procced their 4th Reaping of the Instance on Sporecaller Zancha, similar to what we saw from Method and A.
He might have had the Dispel available, but that's a global cooldown. DPS don't want to use their global cooldowns on anything but things that deal damage, so who knows how it worked out for them nonetheless. No casualties, so totally okay for them as they clean out the 4th Reaping Wave indeed. Sporecaller Zancha at 65% for 40K, of course, and Method and A at 25%, now 23%. So that same kind of 40% boss HP difference that was between them on Kragmaw is still here on Sporecaller Zancha, so the 2 teams have moved at somewhat equal paces after Kragmaw, but it was really just that second room that gave 40K a lot of trouble when Lizelle died, and they had to 4-man quite a significant portion of it.
I mean, the second room is actually just so scary just because of how those Disease Lashes and their Feral Bloodswarmers end up getting pulled. So the Feral Bloodswarmers, of course, have to be kited around, and with a triple melee comp, it's actually, you want to have full melee uptime on all the trash, and you need to be able to get kicks on those Lashers. So you want to be in melee, and you're going to be taking unnecessary damage just from the fixate from those Feral Bloodswarmers. So kind of pacing yourself and pulling maybe a little bit more conservatively might be a little bit more advantageous. We did see Method and A have a couple hiccups there in the very beginning as Lighty ended up going down a couple times, but overall they ended up just kind of dealing with Kragmaw's room a little bit better than we've seen from them previously. So this has actually been very good from the side of Method and A. As for 40K, they just had a couple hiccups. Obviously, Lizelle having to run back on the Reaping actually cost them a ton of time.
Yeah, it was a huge time loss. Method and A pulling, of course, one of the Elephantine Faceless Corruptors off the side on top of the Guardians and Death Speaker, along with the Defiler. So fairly substantial pull coming out of them there, wanting to make sure that you dodge the maddening gaze from that Corruptor, but also the tentacles that slap you around in every which direction from the Abyssal Reach that they do a ton of shadow damage. So that's why you see the players kind of just moving nowhere near them. They have kind of a, they technically attack in front of them, but it's kind of hard to tell what in front of a tentacle is unless you look at the pattern on its body, and it's kind of the last thing you're looking at when you have all these animated guardians smacking you around. So finally they down everything. Bursting stacks tick around on the group. Everybody's nice and safe. We do get a distract on the side for that patrolling Faceless Corruptor, and the team safely stealths past it, grabbing the remaining 2 Faceless Corruptors, guarding the last boss's room, which they will of course pull on top of that nope rope.
Yep, and 40K has down Sporecaller Zancha, maintaining that about minute behind that we have seen continuing from Kragmaw. They're doing a very similar pull to what we just saw on the side of Method in A, as Method in A here dealing with the nope rope and the 2 Faceless Corruptors here.
The 2 Faceless Corruptors.
Oh, it's 3 Faceless
Corruptors.
Okay,
so,
interesting. So
I don't know if they pulled
the nope rope. Okay.
I don't know if that was an accident or not, right? Because they already got started well on the 2 Faceless Corruptors, and the third one just kind of came billowing in from the side of the room. So maybe somebody accidentally didn't skip it. I don't know what it was, but Yoda gets frontaled quite hard from the maddening gaze. He is feared for a while. JB does dispel and dips down to 11% health. Fortunately, it wasn't a one-shot as tentacles start slapping around in random directions one more time, but it's hard to say. Maybe it was intended the whole time, and they said, hey, let's do this instead of one of the Danger Noodles. Maybe we're going to do the Danger Noodle, and this one just came in at the same time. But 40K having a death on their side, 3 deaths on the board now, using the only remaining battle res that they have pretty much for the rest of the map available to them right now as they finish the 3rd boss and are only now heading to the final Guardian pull. But it actually seems like they're going around the left side, so they've done a lot of the trash required already and are already at these 2 Corruptors, where Method in A has completed their 100%, proc their 5th Reaping, and is already headed to the Unbound A-Bomb.
This triple Faceless Corruptor pack is actually just so obnoxious for any melee. Like, I kind of understand why, because the Abyssal Reach, changes like how you end up having to do that pack just a little bit differently than the nope ropes cast, and the reason for that being is like you have to make sure that you're in melee range of that nope rope the whole entire time in order to be able to kick those death bolts, whereas the Faceless Corruptors end up just being able to get like knocked or moved, or you just have to dodge that maddening gaze. So it's kind of a difference in like strategy, but I don't know if it's actually faster.
I don't know, but the Prot Warrior on Method in A easy clapping to victory right now as he's destroying everybody else's damage with the AoE combination with Bloodlust Avatar, and of course all the goodies that come with it in terms of Azerite traits and talent specs. Just showing what Prot Warriors can do right now as they make sure to position the Unbound A-Bomb well in one direction so that it can cast its frontal in that direction. They keep moving in an opposite circular fashion, avoiding the spores and kind of trying to funnel them from only half of the room.
Yeah, so we do see Nerf topping the damage meter here, proving that Prot Warrior is by far the best tank. No more Blood Death Knight. No King reigns supreme for too long.
Krabby mode.
And we do see the Blood Visages coming out on the side of Method in A here, and they're going to get zapped down by Titan Keeper Harazel, and kind of like cleaved in by Method in A here. Basically, Unbound Abomination's health doesn't end up moving because his energy ends up moving, and as soon as he hits 100 energy, he ends up spawning those mobs, and they do end up getting killed, and then he does a percentage of his health.
And of course, when in a group with few titles, his health or energy don't move at all anyways, but 67% right now on the Unbound Abomination. 40K, not really too far behind. They do have the extra death on the board, and they haven't hit their first kind of break point of 67% on the Unbound A-Bomb. So unless something goes terribly wrong right now for Method in A, it looks like they will kind of clutch this first game, and they seem to have overcome their issues in Kragmaw's room, although it did get kind of spicy at one point.
Yeah, I think it actually got spicy for both teams, but Method in A just was able to kind of recover a little bit better than we did see on the side of 40K. Obviously, Lizelle getting that Reaping, having to run all the way back, just costed them a ton of time. Something that we do see here from Nerf is he's actually been kind of dipping in, killing those rotten spores in order to be able to proc his victory rush here, which is actually something that's very good from him, because you see right there on screen, he procs it by killing those spores with the Thunderclap, and then he gets the free healing here.
Yeah, 20% max heal. It's a fair bit of damage, especially when JB and Igloo on the Rusted Druids on either side are very busy, just making sure everyone's healthy through the increasing amount of stacks before they're able to clean it with that kind of AoE holy aura. Unbound Abomination, 66% checkpoint has been reached already for 40K, working towards that second one. Method in A on the 33% one, and any moment now we should be expecting to see the final 2 Blood Visages on the side there that they will kind of grab as quickly as possible, allow the Construct in the middle to kill, and they should be moving on to game 2.
Yeah, I actually really like Method in A's strategy of how they're moving around the room here, making sure that they are overlapping the Vial from Unbound Abomination, and you do actually see the last 2 Blood Visages spawn here on the side of Method in A. Clap 1, clap 2, it's 40K, it's over.
It's I think definitely a really nice advantage here for Method in A. This is certainly one of those maps that we we always preach is really good for those Death Knights.
Yeah, and the reason for that being is that you're actually able to grip the mech jockeys near those unpiloted Peacekeeper robots with really good efficiency and really good consistency. So just making sure that you actually do get as many of those Peacekeepers activated as quickly as possible is actually very important. We've seen previously on teaming weeks, we've seen like a 7 Peacekeeper pull out of the side of Method NA. While I don't think we necessarily expect that many coming in this time, it's definitely something to be looking out for. What do you actually think about Sanguine with this Death Knight here?
I mean, I could just stop it. What do you think about Sanguine on this map? You know, it's really funny. Before this weekend, I was doing a queue with Nagura on live, and we had a Sanguine Motherload, and it was just an absolute nightmare. So when I said I feel for these players, I really feel for these players. I know what it's like doing keys on Motherload with Sanguine, especially when they're in a race environment too. It's really stressful, really frustrating. And it's not even just that, Tettles, that you're mentioning with the Sanguine. It's the trash splash residual damage on the melee. We talk about it all the time. We have the charges from the Thugs, we have the Ice Spritzer cast from the refreshment vendors. We of course have the mech jockeys with their grease gun, and not just that, but then to add kind of salt in the wound here, we have quaking on top of all that. So when it's already tough enough, you might miss a toxic blade cast, whatever. You have reaping just proccing it at the absolute worst moment. So really tough for these teams on this map.
Yeah, it looks like Nerf and on the side of Method NA, they've actually been doing a really good job of making sure those Peacekeepers do actually stay out of that Sanguine, like we've been talking about the whole entire time. They were really patient with their first pull and did it without Bloodlust, where Fourty K ending up pulling 2 or 3 Peacekeepers with their first pull, popping that Bloodlust, where Method NA was just a little bit more patient after their first pull. All that trash, all those low health mobs ended up dying, and then they ended up pulling 2 Peacekeepers in, making sure that they just did not stand and bathe in that Sanguine for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah, and the real key, and the team that's going to win this outside of obviously any disastrous wipe, is the team that's going to control the Sanguine best with the Peacekeepers pre-first boss. Like, that's going to be the absolute key to this dungeon for them. Both teams moving quite well here. 40 K just an advantage on trash by 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but on a map, the trash richest map of all of the dungeons, Motherload, 1% can actually equate to a fair bit, at least at the beginning of the dungeon. Nonetheless, they're battling back and forth right now.
Yep, and you actually do see on the side of 40K that one Peacekeeper is kind of bathing in that Sanguine, gaining 5 health per second as he does, or 5% health per second as he does cast that energy shield. Just very unfortunate on the side of 40K that that Peacekeeper was just so low HP there. On the side of Method NA, they finally procced their first reaping of the instance, and they were doing a pretty good pull here.
Pretty good pull with double assassins. You got to interrupt those toxic blades. Those are just kickable, but then they also cast Hail of Flechettes, and the Flechettes need to be hard CC'd, hard interrupted by either a gouge, a stun, a displace, whatever it may be, a disorient even. But otherwise, they will just nuke the group for large amounts of damage. A lot of damage coming in on Shakib as he bathes in that Sanguine for just a moment and dips right out of it. Quaking coming in here for Method NA, doing well to spread out. Shakib quite low, pops his own cooldown just to make sure he stays alive as 40K dealing with their first reaping on top of, I believe, the same pull. Yes, I see the hired assassins there in the back from them as well. So same pulls coming out of both teams here.
Yeah, but the difference here is that Unholy Death Knight that we've been talking about. So Shakib actually doing 300k DPS while we only see Wolf Disco topping out the meter for 40k at 165. So that's just something to point out, the power of this Unholy Death Knight. Whenever the reaping ends up spawning, Shakib ends up popping all of his cooldowns and ends up taking out that pack very quickly. We do end up seeing that reaping go down instead of 40k. It looks like that Peacekeeper is casting his energy shield and has been positioned really well outside of the Sanguine there.
And it also looks like Lighty has gone down here for Method NA as well, opting not to use the battle res just yet. JB is holding on, making sure everybody's nice and healthy before resing him. Battle res goes up finally. Shakib taking a lot of damage from one of the Ice Spritzers going in as he runs around the side of the hut in order to rejoin the rest of the team right now. Lighty's still kind of low. JB certainly has his hands full right now. Nerf Clap's still quite healthy as well, but this is a pretty dangerous pull. The Thug has inhaled vapors as well and is charging everybody on the side of the map that is out of range. Yoda dipping quite low. Ice Spritzer going out on him. He does proc his cheat death, and JB finally manages to get his hands on him and heal him up back up above 50% HP. Everything nice and dandy for 40k though, but they pull with their own heavy pull. There's just so much damage coming out for Method NA right now. Nerf Clap barely surviving. His health is yo-yoing higher than my heart rate watching this right now.
And you do actually get that Ring of Peace and knocking the mobs towards Nerf there, as all of these Peacekeepers and all of these mobs just standing in the Sanguine there for a couple seconds. Obviously that energy shield being cast in it. Man, that refreshment vendor was actually just picking people off on the side of Method NA. It had like a couple not full casted Ice Spritzers, but for multiple seconds the group was just dropping incredibly low. I think I saw Shakib hit like 1% health there.
Yeah, and of course Ice Spritzer is that damage over time channel component on a player, and if the entire cast gets off, it nukes you and freezes you. So good that they interrupted it beforehand beforehand, but there was so much going on. They maybe just straight up ran out of resources for interrupts. Ironic to say in a full melee group with a DK as well and paralysis and everything, but these pulls just get so out of hand so quickly. Nonetheless, Method and A do manage to squeak by. No full wipe for them as the second Reaping Wave come in. Group not relatively too healthy right now. Most of them at 50% as JB dips quite low, sub 30, and Nerf Clap getting chunked left and right as well, trying to get these Risen Souls down as quickly as possible. 40K having their hands full on the right side as well, dealing with the second Reaping pack coming in, plus a pull of their own.
Yeah, this is definitely interesting on the side of 40K. Something I actually just remembered about how DK ends up working out with these Peacekeepers as well is, you know, those Peacekeepers that are already been piloted by the mech jockey, you actually do get count from the mech jockey whenever those already pre-piloted Peacekeepers end up dying. So that might be another reason that Method and A has elected to also run this Unholy Death Knight. But 40K sticking in it, they've actually been a little bit more consistent than we have seen on the side of Method and A. Everybody on Method and A has just been so low for so long for a lot of this, while 40K has just been very clean here.
No, I mean, absolutely. 40K just playing really nicely. No deaths on their board. I think both rogues still have their cheat death available as well. Method and A certainly a bit with their back against the wall here. They don't have the cheat death available on Yoda. They don't have the battle res available for another 4 minutes or so. So if something goes wrong, it can go wrong very quickly. They don't have a lot of those safety nets that prevent some of the groups from having full wipes. Flechettes finally gets interrupted here as JB dips below 50% health. Relatively stable here finally on Method and A as they reach 48% count on trash. 40K spreading out for their respective quaking. 45% trash on the board for them as they look to work down the remaining two Peacekeepers that they have pulled.
Yep, these two Peacekeepers are very easy to keep out of Sanguine since those are the only two mobs they do have to manage and to deal with here. Method and A here using their Ring of Peace in order to be able to knock some of the mobs there. As you do see Nerf here, heroic leaping away as the whole entire group then pops their group Shadow Meld there.
Method and A getting in on the last trash pack before coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, which is the first boss of the dungeon. Now, we do know that at least normally these teams try to get at least the fourth Reaping Wave procced onto this boss, so this is definitely very early for Method and A to be considering this boss, but they might have some new routing up their sleeve for this round. We'll have to see exactly what they have up, but this is also usually the place where they kind of did their whole 5 Peacekeeper pull and fighted around in circles for 4 hours. I'm not sure if they're going to end up doing that. Doesn't look like they are. They're keeping it a bit more conservative. 40K, however, is not, as they round up 3 Peacekeepers and a lot of those adult thugs that are starting to Vape Nation, hail vapors everywhere and charge the furthest target. So Igloo could actually take a huge chunk of damage if some of those thugs charged at just the wrong time.
Yeah, in addition to that, the reason that we actually did see Method and A end up Shadow Melding after that Ring of Peace there is that the Peacekeepers, whenever they do pilot that mech, put you in instance-wide combat, and they won't end up proxy pulling some of the mobs around them. So they were actually just making sure that they only got the Peacekeeper out of that pack and nothing else. So they were just trying to move the mech jockey, and then after they ended up tagging all that stuff, then they just group Shadow Melded just to get the Peacekeeper. 40K here doing a pretty big pull here with multiple Peacekeepers and 2 thugs here, making sure that those thugs do get soothed there whenever they do inhale vapors and have that enrage.
Thug life for them. 40K should be proccing their third Reaping, I think, with the thugs. I think it's going to kind of invade on top of the Peacekeepers. We'll see no one. Perhaps not. I think they actually need to kill one of the Peacekeepers before they get that proc. Not sure if the Labor and the remaining thugs enough. Nonetheless, we'll see as Method and A is the exact same trash percent right now. 57 on the board for them on the left side, doing their own pull of consisting of some thugs, vendors, and of course jockeys in there. Another Peacekeeper joining their ranks too.
Yep, Lizelle hitting a fat Ring of Peace there, making sure that all the Sanguine gets away from those Peacekeepers as those Peacekeepers are dropping incredibly low here. They have procced their third Reaping up the instance here, passing 60%. As Method and A still sitting at 59% here, as they do have one of the Peacekeepers sitting there casting his Energized Shield, sitting in Sanguine.
You know, it's kind of weird. I do feel at some point, somewhere between the 50% to where we are now, Method and A kind of did some pretty modest pulls compared to what we've seen them do, and 40K kind of used this opportunity to rocket ahead of them just a bit. I mean, 10% is a fair bit of trash. As I say that, of course, now the third Reaping Wave is invading the screen of Method and A, along with a bunch of trash. A lot of damage going out on Nerf Clap. JB has to make sure to babysit those stacks while getting those dispels off at least every 8 seconds, as often as he can, really, but sometimes you might need to snipe it depending with what other damage is coming in. Lighty down to 50%. JB just can't pay attention to him right now because so much damage on Nerf Clap, and Lighty just sitting at that 40%, finally gets a heal from JB as 40K 72%. I believe they have enough trash here to proc that 80% Reaping Wave that we often expect teams to drag right into the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, the first boss of the dungeon, as mentioned earlier. Yep,
and 40K, you actually did see Igloo taunting out that assassin out of the middle of the group in order to be able to get that Sanguine in a really good spot, as you do see it here on the left side. I think whenever you were talking about the modest pulls, I think the Shadow Meld shenanigans, while they were kind of cool, I think it ended up just costing them a lot of enough time, because in that meantime, Fourty K was actually doing a pretty sizable pull and just using their Ring of Peace really well to make sure that the mobs weren't getting healed.
Yeah, I mean, 40K doing well to kite Rentari running around in circles, just making sure none of these mobs are sitting in the Sanguine. That's what you got to do, though, right?
Is Rentari really a tank here?
Yeah. He's just running around, making sure there's no Sanguine healing on the mobs. Well done from them as they run up as quickly as they can. Ring of Peace defensively popped in their tranks from Lae'zel right now, getting ready to get right in on that boss. They do Shadow Meld right away. Igloo gets his drink off, and right onto the first boss they go. I'm not sure if the 4th Reaping Wave is going to end up reaching them, or if they were able to Shadow Meld all, if not most of it off. We'll see if they invade the screen here in a moment. But 40K already started on the first boss. Method and A still at 68% trash, looking to get to that 80%. 2 Peacekeepers still at half health on their screen. They haven't even started on the first boss yet.
Yeah, but here comes the D&D for Shakib here, as you do see the Typhoon and that Ring of Peace coming out, trying to get all those mobs away from those Peacekeepers as they cast the Energized Shield, just making sure that they are able to stay. They were looking like they were about 50-ish% health, so with Shakib's damage in there coming in, making sure that they're just getting those mobs off those Peacekeepers so they don't end up healing is important. But 40K is just already so far ahead here, getting coin-operated Crowd Pummeler down to 65% here.
Yeah, I mean, 40K really relying on themselves for kicking these kind of foot bombs, soccer balls well into the boss, something that they know that the NA counterpart won't be able to do very well, just by virtue of that they're North American. Is that how it works, Settles? But jokes aside, 40K, 59% on the boss, so they did on purpose skip that 4th Reaping Wave because they just don't have the power or really benefit coming from that Unholy DK, so they procced all of their Reaping well far away from the boss's room, just immediately Swiftfoot Potion, ran into the room, dropped the Ring of Peace, Shadow Melded pretty much all of it off, and then got right on the boss because they don't care to kill it.
Yeah.
They don't need it. They don't need it on top of the boss. They don't have an Unholy DK. There's no point to put it in the rest of the group, so really well done by them there as they reach 45%. Method and A finally following suit and only now pulling the boss, but we do have the 4th Reaping Wave coming, so Shakib should hopefully make some nice work of this.
Yeah, 40K, Lae'zel's Ring of Pieces in general have actually been so insane, but they actually have not elected to use Bloodlust here on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, so maybe they end up saving it for something later on?
Was it Abrakeydabra, I think, Nagura mentioned with yesterday as well? We are 11 minutes, almost 12 minutes into this map right now.
Yeah, but they both used them on pull. Abrakeydabra ended up holding their Bloodlust for 10.5 minutes on pull and not ending up using it at all.
Did they both use on pull, or did it just come up?
40K did end up using it on pull.
So Method and A used it here. 40K is likely then using it for the trash after this, a fairly substantial pull that usually comes in after the first boss, getting you to around, well, it varies, but most groups get in the high 90s% just so they can sneeze on something after that and end up finishing the map with only Rixa and Mogul Razdunk, the 3rd and 4th boss of the dungeon. Operated Crowd Pummeler going down. 40K getting ready here to do what I assume is going to be a fairly meaty pull along with that Bloodlust.
So if they are electing to use Bloodlust here, I would expect them to pull a 5-pack here. If they're only doing a 4-pack, I'm pretty sure they could have actually done that without using Bloodlust. Maybe they just end up holding it, because it looks like they're only pulling 3 packs of mobs here.
Yeah, only 3, and they're holding it as well, so...
Yeah.
Maybe Azeroth?
Yeah.
I mean, after this, they just don't have that much left to do outside of starting to stealth up to Azeroth, and maybe combining Taskmaster Ascari with that. We'll have to see what they do. 40K, 84% on the board. Rentari doing well to move out of the Sapper explosions as they get low and pretty much kill themselves, finish themselves off with a 20% cast. Good Typhoon coming in from Igloo there as one of the Earth Shapers were sitting in the Sanguine that had spawned from the mobs previously. 88% now that they're done. And it looks like they're looking to pull more right now. So 88% on the board for them now that they're done. They run in and pull what will be the remaining trash needed just prior to 100%. Method NA, 15% on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, looking to move around as JB runs around in stag form, kicking the rest of those foot bombs into the boss, making him take that increased 50% damage per bomb hit.
Yeah, this is actually wild. 40K is still electing not to use their Bloodlust, so maybe they're just going to end up popping it on Azeroth without any of the trash next to it, because they're not going to end up needing it because they're going to have so much count. In addition to that, I don't love the idea of them pulling trash onto Azeroth just because of this Sanguine environment here. But Method NA does down coin-operated Crowd Pummeler. Method NA is probably going to end up doing a pretty big pull here just because they do have access to that Unholy DK, which, as we know, does a ton of AoE damage here.
Yeah, a ton of AoE damage indeed. 40K still working to clean up the rest of the piles that they've pulled. Pretty big pull coming in here for Method NA. It's the 5-pack coming coming in. A lot of casters here with the Earth Shapers, and the Rock Lances can chunk the tank really hard. JB actually takes one of them to the face first before Nerf Clap's able to get aggro on everything. We do have, of course, the Earth Shields coming out. Nothing that the players can do to dispel that, but just crazy amounts of damage coming in from not only Nerf Clap, as you can see, but the Unholy DK as well. Excellent control by the team to make sure that they punt them out of that huge amount of Sanguine that goes down, and the rest of them they will kite around slowly just to make sure they don't die in Sanguine themselves. So really, really well done by the team here. Huge pull for Method to help kind of catch up because they were a fair bit behind. They're 94% now. 40K, though, have already moved up the hill to Azarok, looking to get that Heart of Azarok.
Yeah, and they've actually used their Bloodlust on the side of Azarok, on the side of 40K. It's kind of interesting that they're actually using it to deal with these Earth Ragers very quickly. I kind of understand it. So whenever you are running a triple melee lineup, having a bunch of these Earth Ragers fixating and meleeing down, they need to be killed quickly, especially whenever you're running a triple melee lineup, just because they do reduce your uptime on Azarok. So them electing to use Bloodlust here, while definitely interesting, is definitely something we haven't seen before, but they are making very quick work of those Earth Ragers there.
You know, it's nice to see these kind of DPS still exist these days. Most DPS will just sit there, take the bleeds, and then yell at someone like Jack to heal them, and then blame it on him when they die, which is the proper way to do it, in my opinion. But nonetheless, Azarok down to 63% for them, and Method at 87. Method still needs 6% trash, which is actually a relative fair bit compared to what there is in the remainder. So they'll either run down and do a chunky pull in the R&D wing, or they will pull Taskmaster Ascari on top of this trash when we're into kind of that snooze phase, if you will, on Azarok once the 4 Earth Ragers die and the DPS are just kind of sitting there mindlessly DPSing and there's not really much to do.
Yeah, Azarok kind of turns into like a patchwork-style fight once you do get those Earth Ragers down. 40K, I don't actually think they made a lot of use of that Bloodlust. Obviously, they're still 20% ahead of Method but they were a pretty sizable amount ahead. Method ended up doing that 5-pack, and that's actually where they came back, is they did a pull that 40K ended up doing in 2 separate pulls all in one, and it actually is just putting them so far ahead here. Or actually, not pulling them so far ahead, but pulling them back into competition here just because of the choice of that Unholy DK there.
Yeah, but I mean, tyrannical environment is 20% on a boss is a lot.
Yeah.
In a tyrannical environment, especially on Azarok. Azarok just takes so long to chisel down. So you know, hopefully it works out for them. It's just a big rock monster. What can I say? And nobody has paper and rock paper scissors here, so they're not going to be able to kill him off right at the start. Get your hand away from me. Probably not right now. Method NA right now on 39% on Azarok here. 14 for 40K. They're actually starting to widen the gap a bit, but I suspect that's because the second round of cooldowns has just come up here for 40K. Bit of fish. Did he pull everything successfully?
They didn't pull Taskmaster Akari.
They pulled the
elemental guys. Yeah.
The Stone Furies.
The Stone Furies. Yeah. So he's ending up pulling the Stone Furies, which end up doing this Furies quick, and they'll end up putting shields on stuff like that. But as long as you end up kicking the shields and dealing and knocking that Furies quick is actually really important. But it looks like they might have socialed that other pack that's sitting there.
I think they socialed the other pack. Ascari's on there too. We saw this mistake yesterday. So on top of it, with all the quaking, the Stone Fury interrupts that you need, Ascari's running around in there with 2 Earth Shapers as well and 2 Sappers. Yoda procs his cheat death and goes down. They do have the battle res available. Immediately JB gets that up on him so that he can continue to DPS and try to get through their mistake here of just pulling too much trash. But another quaking pulses, and JB just falls too far behind with the fixate on top of him and goes down. They don't have the checkpoint here. The boss has not died yet. Nerf Clap whittling down at 7%, procs his Somebody's bargain trinket and is just unable to be healed. Lighty doing what he can, but it's not enough. Azarok's health in this tyrannical environment is way too high. 10% for them to be able to try kill it off without a healer. So Method NA is going to have a full team wipe here, whilst 40K has already moved beyond it. Proc their 100% reaping trash and is running over to Rix's room to shadow meld it.
Yep, 40K here coming with a very significantly safer strat. JB, whenever he did go and pull those mobs, he ended up walking back into Azarok's room just a little bit too early, and those mobs ended up walking straight through the Taskmaster pack, ending up pulling them. So it was just a little bit of impatience outside of the Method NA, which that was actually a really good pull. I actually really like the idea of them pulling those 2 Stone Furies as opposed to the Taskmaster pack in order for them to be able to get their count there, because if you do have that Taskmaster pack, it's actually just kind of scary there.
It is, and I think we saw 2 teams do the same Stone Fury pull yesterday, and one of them had the exact same problem with CCing one of the Shale Spiders or the Stone Furies too close to Taskmaster Ascari, and it wiped them as well, whereas one team pulled it off. So the success rate generally of the teams doing the Stone Fury pulls is not high, at least live on broadcast here.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked out just yet in terms of social aggro.
Yeah, we actually do see 40K getting Rixa Flex Flame down to 80%. Rixa has a couple of key abilities, only 2 or 3 of them. She has the Propellant Blast here, which you actually see on screen right now, which will end up clearing the platform from all the goop that she ends up putting on the ground. And in addition to that, she does have the Chemical Burn, which she'll put on the 2 nearest targets. This Chemical Burn, of course, can be spell reflected or diffuse magic or something, or it can be immune from the rogues as well, in order for them to either not get it or reflect the damage back onto Rixa, which ends up allowing you to kill Rixa significantly quicker.
Method and A starting up again on Azarok. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place right now as they have wiped on the second boss once, 8 deaths on the board, and have to, I mean, it was a devastatingly low percent wipe as well, so they have to chew through 90% of the boss's health yet again, whilst 40K is at 50%. I mean, this one for, we've seen so many matches here, Title. This one, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much over. It's in 40K's bag to win. Now, a lot of things can always go wrong. Of course. That's obviously why we play the maps, and don't just end the match right now assuming 40K is going to win. Anything can go wrong, but the most front-loaded, difficult parts of the dungeon for 40K are done. They're done with all the trash. They've killed they've dealt with all their reaping waves, skipped through the reaping successfully, don't have a single death on the board. These 2 bosses, yes, they can certainly present an issue. I mean, there are tyrannical bosses, they can wipe you, but at this point it's going to take a lot for the team to lose, especially with a 40 second because of the 8 deaths to overcome for Method and A.
Yeah, Rixa Flux Flame is actually kind of scary, especially if you do actually have that chemical burn on the tank for prolonged periods of time. It could potentially cost your tank some survivability, or he could end up going down. But we actually do see Rentari in the side of 40K. They've actually been doing a really good job of baiting that chemical burn onto people with either defensives or diffuse magic, or a lot of these spell reflection, or a lot of these other abilities that people are able to use on the side of 40K. As for Method and A, they finally have Azarok again, sub 50%, while Rixa Flux Flame will be going down shortly here for 40K.
Yeah, Azarok now down to 40 in just a moment. 5% left on Rixa for 40K, after which they will, of course, mass stealth from one of the rogues, followed by the other one, and just try to get as close to Mogul Razdunk's platform as possible. Now, we've only seen it once, somehow, beautifully, successfully, from one of the East teams to actually snake their entire way up of this hill and not aggro a single one of these war machines on the side, because those do have true sight. And it was maybe the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We'll see if 40K is able to do the same thing, but they are maybe.
Maybe
they're going for it. Oh God, please.
They might.
Oh, except for the one at the end, right? But for the most part, they did that quite beautifully. So the Warrior will grab it on the Rentari, will heroic leap in, and of course, the entire team will Shadow Meld safely off. So beautiful skip by them here. No deaths on the board. Nothing crazy needed to be spent in terms of survival on their side. Unlucky Quaking just as Igloo's trying to get a bit of healing there, but they should be ready to go here on the last boss, as Method and A has now downed Azarok and is mounted up to the R&D wing.
This has actually just been such a clean run from the side of 40K. They've actually done such a good job of using their Ring of Pieces in the first half of this instance in order to be able to not sanguine up the mobs, and they've actually been doing this dungeon in a very quick pace. You're actually able to distract that war machine and kind of snake by it if you actually want to, but we actually did see Rentari just using his heroic leap there, and they popped their Shadow Meld, and everybody being okay on the side of 40K. As for Method and A, they have finally downed Azarok here, and they're killing some of the masterminds and some of the assistants. We were kind of, I guess they were originally just going to pull those Stone Furies and get the percent from the Stone Furies and Shield Biters, but now they have kind of altered their route, and they're pulling some of the masterminds on the side after in the R&D wing there.
Yeah, maybe they just don't want to try that pull again. It went sour. Like, it didn't work out for them, so they're just dealing indeed with some of that R&D wing, and then they'll run over to Rixa's platform as well and use their Shadow Meld skips respectively. But all eyes here on 40K right now, as we're at 67% on Mogul Razdunk's first phase. We do know 50%, of course, he will, 50-ish percent, depending on what he's casting, he will rise up in the air with his 99, I believe, percent reduction shield, making him pretty much invulnerable to damage, as the players will have to bait him around and drill into the ground of the totems he puts down to make sure that he gets out of that phase.
Yep. He will be going in that phase in just a couple more percent here. As we do see on the side of Method and A, they have actually done their skip, but they ended up having JB go down there whenever they were actually trying to do their 100% reaping skip with their Shadow Melds and stuff like that. So Letty will probably be looking to position in order to be able to single target res him just as long as JB is actually in range. They have to end up dealing with just a couple of these Risen Soul mobs before JB will actually be able to be res. So he's actually on the platform, so it'll just take a couple more seconds. But 40K here in the intermission still on Mogul Razdunk, just killing these 2 Sky Scorchers, making sure that you do get that drill down on top of those oil drums here in a couple seconds, and you'll be able to phase Mogul Razdunk out of his intermission pretty quickly.
Yeah, just a moment here. Second Sky Scorcher is pretty high for them, but I mean, just a really, really impressive run from 40K overall. I guess it was a pleasure to watch this. And you know, they certainly didn't win this by pulling slow and steady and one team messed up too much. They were ahead of Method and A when Method and A had their boo-boo. It's not like that's what they used to catch up. They had very aggressive pulls at the start titles. Everything worked out great for them. 0 deaths on the board. You know, let's not jinx it too early here, but they are about to enter their last phase in just a moment here. Just excellent run from them.
Yeah, overall, this has actually been super good. We've seen Rentari, his kiting at the very beginning of the instance was actually just super good with how you end up having to deal with Sanguine here. And they are getting this last drill down on this oil drum as Igloo ends up running over it here with that big arrow on his screen. And then Mogul Razdunk will be coming down here in just a couple more seconds. 40K has actually been going so fast that they don't even have Bloodlust yet available for them, as they did end up using it pretty late on Azeroth, though.
Maybe it was part of their plan all along.
I mean, probably, because they're going to still end up getting it up, but it's going to end up being maybe like the bottomish 20% on Mogul Razdunk. They might not end up getting a full lust, but maybe they ended up deciding that 2.5 lusts is better than 3, I guess.
Yeah, yes. Maybe that's what they decided. You know what, though? In a world of so many things that can go wrong on a Sanguine Motherload, this is the least of their worries, and this is a good problem to have.
Yes.
We moved through the dungeon too quickly and killed things too quickly. I think we'll actually get a significant portion of their Bloodlust available. It's coming up in just 5 seconds here. Method and A still chewing it through. Rixa Flux Flame, of course, not to be forgotten. Ata just reaching that half mark, 52%, 50% in just a moment. There goes the Bloodlust. Don't think they'll be able to really use all of it, but they will at least have it for when actual Mogul Razdunk comes out of his mouth. They're able to smack him real quick.
Yeah, so after Mogul Razdunk does hit the 0% like Sloot was talking about, the man who pilots the head right there ends up shooting out of the top of Mogul Razdunk. He has like very little HP, and he'll end up getting killed, triggering the end of the instance here.
That guy's always had a good head on his shoulders, but 40K finally finishing off the second map and tying the series 1-1 with a very impressive tangle.
Yeah, both have come in very useful situations. As we're diving in into King's Rest, this is game 3. The winner moves on, loser gets eliminated.
Don't want to be eliminated here on the third cup right now, but a lot on the line here, as we know. Of course, Tettles, these points do transition over to future seasons as well. So both teams rushing straight into that room. We can already see Igloo running straight up to the gong, getting ready to push it and start on the 4-pack of trash. I assume, at least, both teams will be pulling the entirety of the room. That's kind of become the norm at this high level of play.
Yep, Method and A, all too familiar with 3-game series here, as we have discussed that a lot. So they're definitely going to be looking to keep it cool, calm, and collective, as Nerf does end up pulling that 4-pack in this room, and you do actually see the pull mirrored by 40K. Actually, you do see 2 of the Warriors standing off to the side on the side of 40K, where on the side of Method and A, they're actually pulling the whole entire room together.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's just like Sour said earlier, when you could do 2 pulls in one, it's just faster, NA math, right? So you got to get those pulls in at some point. They will have to pull those Warriors and cleave them down. 40K just not feeling confident enough right now to pull everything together. They've actually not pulled 2 of the packs.
Yeah, okay.
So it looks like they've only done 2, certainly the more 2 dangerous pulls, but it's only 2 of the 4 packs. So they've split this into 2-pull room on Method and A, just rifling through everything. So much healing coming out of JB right now, making sure that Nerf is nice and healthy. And you know, looking over, I haven't had any heart palpitations looking at their health, especially Nerf's at any point. So really well done by the tank healer combo on the side of Method and A right now, as they kill the 22% trash, pick up the first reaping wave, and get ready for the Golden Serpent encounter.
Yeah, so Method and A ends up getting their reaping there. 40K ends up having to pull those 2 packs together as well, just kind of taking it a little bit slower, making sure that they have a little bit higher consistency in this first room. But Method and A is actually just taking a strong, commanding lead there, doing that whole entire room together.
I mean, all eyes on that 2-pack right now on 40K. Method and A already dealing with the Golden Serpent. So, you know, it really come down to mana management here on the side of JB. A bit of RNG, of course, who keeps getting that spit gold that spawns the little ooey gooeys on the side. JB, of course, as I say that, unfortunately getting the first one, but he's already well positioned outside of the boss's range to be able to start dropping pools on the side. Mana management, absolutely crucial for the healers. We have seen yesterday especially some failures on the part of just mana pools not being enough to deal with the rest of the encounter, really, especially with bad luck on the healers and the healers dropping low. Even Method, you even had that problem, if I'm not mistaken, with Azalea in the last 10%, but the team was able to kill it just at the last moment.
Yeah, it really just kind of depends on how many of those liquid gold casts you get in a successful order. Resto has a really good ability in order to be able to top themselves just with how many hots from their mastery and stuff they end up applying to people. But if they don't have like Swiftman available or like Cenarian Ward or any of these major single target healing tools, then it's going to be pretty scary. We actually do know that JB is running Mass Entangling inside of King's Rest, and the reason that he ends up doing is for this Golden Serpent. So they deem so whenever the Golden Serpent casts Lucre's Call, he ends up spawning all these animated golds depending on how many of these pools of gold you do end up having on the ground. So JB here electing to run Mass Entangle so the group doesn't end up having to swap off of the boss, and ends up having like with the ability in order to be able to just pummel full single target into the Golden Serpent here.
Yeah, it's a really nice combo coming out here with the Ring of Peace to regroup the golds up every time, followed by JB's Mass Entangle angle, allowing him to just get everything nice and prepared with regrowths for those dots. He certainly has one of those spit golds right now. A bit of trouble on the side of 40K though. We did see Wolf Disco's cheat death proc, so he won't have that available for those 6 minutes now. So he's quite vulnerable to the next spit gold should he get it. One of the two rogues kind of fallback mechanisms is now gone. On top of it, Lofus started the entire fight by getting clipped by one of the swirlies from the Lost Soul and not having that cloak available, meaning he was dealing 10% less damage for 30 seconds. That adds up over the course of the fight by a fair bit, which is why you see him below Rentari's damage right now. Method NA 25% on the Golden Serpent, 40K 52% on it, as Method NA looking to be quite well. JB jumping in there, being comfortable enough with the team to get a bunch of damage in kitty form, waiting for the next spit gold to come out. It does come out on Lighty. He might have, it looks like he has actually defensives available, so really well done for them as he pops that dampen harm, if I'm not mistaken, and runs it out to the side of the room, buying JB some more time to DPS the boss in a moment.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of the Mass Entangle in King's Rest from JB. So the only alternative to this really for the rest of Druid would actually be Typhoon, and the reason that you'd end up using Typhoon here is because of the King in the Gauntlet room. Whenever he does cast his Lightning Rod, you're actually able to knock that with Typhoon, but they do have a Ring of Peace available for that. So JB electing to have the Golden Serpent not move as much, and Method NA is jumping out to a pretty commanding lead here, killing the Serpent about 30% quicker than 40K.
Yeah, Nerf Clap just has that 4-stack of Grievous, but it should be no problem. They're just going to drop a Fish Feast right now, so JB can mana up and everybody gets over that 90% threshold for the Grievous in just a moment here. Nerf Clap runs in, starts the RP of the room, and starts eating that disgusting Fish Feast on the ground. 40K now, Lizelle having a bit of trouble as he starts ticking down to 6%. The Grievous is rolling on him, and Igloo's doing whatever he can to keep him alive, but it's just not enough. So much damage coming in from that Spit Gold. They are forced to use their Battle Res. The boss still has 22% on the board for 40K, so that not going to be available for them again for another about 4.5 minutes. So already starting here on the back foot, 40K, not only did they do the room slower by doing it in 2 pulls, but on top of it have now been forced to use their Battle Res as Wolf Disco goes down as well. He had procced his cheat death earlier from the exact same thing. One of the Spit Gold debuffs just wasn't enough from Resto Igloo, and he goes down this time on a second rotation. Igloo just barely healing himself through the remaining tick of that debuff. At this point, if Igloo dies, they should be able to kill the boss off, but 9% on the boss right now as the entire room is just covered in gold as well. But JB going down on the side of Method NA. Yoda proccing his cheat death. He releases immediately and starts running back. Nerf Clap at 27%, but the accrued Grievous dots are just too much to handle. He heroic leaps out of the room and tries to get back in time to meet JB and not die on the side of Method NA. Both teams having just an absolute struggle right now.
Yeah, Nerf is actually trying to get away from that gauntlet, those gauntlet trash, and meet back up with JB as JB did instantly release. 40K there having so many issues too. Rentari ends up going down with the Golden Serpent at 5%. It's only Lofus and Igloo. If those animated golds hit the boss, and it's over for 40K here with the boss resetting as the full group wipes at 5% on the Golden Serpent here. Method NA here obviously having troubles of their own, but they're way further ahead.
The lesser of two evils certainly are their struggles on Method NA side right now. They didn't wipe at 4% on a high tyrannical boss in King's Rest, nonetheless known to have some of the most ruthless bosses of all the dungeons. So 40K are going to have to unfortunately pick themselves back up and just get going on the Golden Serpent again. Method NA did manage to dodge a bit of a bullet here. JB did go down. They still have their Bloodlust available their Battle Res available, as JB is the only one who can Battle Res. He was dead, immediately released, and just ran back in to try and get the heal on Nerf Clap. So well salvaged and well communicated by the team there too. JB just wasted 0 time, released, dashed right away, and the team met him halfway to be able to be healed through the Grievous that was already stacking on the group. So they recovered nicely here, 43% for them as they spawn their second Reaping and get back in action on the Gauntlet.
Yeah, they actually spawned some of the rest of the Reaping mobs pretty far away from this Gauntlet room, unfortunately, so it's going to take them a while to kind of funnel in, allowing Nerf to get kind of high on stacks before he ends up getting dispelled here, and they do actually end up getting the next Gauntlet mob, as 40K here has engaged the Golden Serpent again, having that down to 80%.
Oof, that's a lot of time lost for 40K, obviously. At this point, we're already in a situation of, pointing the oof and yikes signs. Don't worry, those will come out later. But already pushed back in a situation where they're once again just hoping something bad happens to Method NA. And Method NA, they've averted a couple of disaster situations. We saw in Underrot the good heads-up play there from JB and the rest of the group to Shadow Meld and get the res on Lighty. They've done it again here, so it looks like they're well prepared for things to go wrong. Pretty admirable on their part, as opposed to just kind of trying to brute force it and having the full wipe. They're opting to play a bit more defensively, but Lizelle goes down again on the side of 40K. Wolf Disco ticking from the dot as well. Both rogues obviously do not have their cheat death available because of the full wipe. Everybody's so vulnerable. They're going to just try to 4-man the rest of this boss at 60%. I don't know if Igloo's mana is going to hold up to that, Tettles.
I think we ended up seeing this in East Cup last week as one of the teams. I think it might have been the company versus Battle for Champion match. I think a company ended up 4-manning the Golden Serpent from 50% as well. So it's definitely doable. We have actually seen it previous here, but Method NA is just going to be going further and further ahead here, just making sure that they are killing the rest of these Gauntlet mobs as the Queen and her Raptor have ended up spawning here, and they will be going down in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, the final part of the Gauntlet here has just gone down as Method NA rushes out the exit of the Gauntlet. Will likely mass stealth past the construct. Wolf Disco going down, unfortunately, for 40K again, and there is absolutely no way they're going to finish the rest of this boss with a 3-man. Another full wipe coming out of 40K here on the right side, and they are forced to release and just try it one more time. I guess silver lining here is they will have their Bloodlust available once again once they reach the Golden Serpent. So a bit of silver lining to their unfortunate situation right now as Method NA runs in, pulls all of the embalming fluids together. Let's see if they do a more aggressive pull here with the constructs on the side, but it looks like they're playing it safe. Tettles, we mentioned it a million times. They know at this point what's going on with 40K. Why risk it?
Yeah, we've actually seen them in previous matches not pulling the constructs with all these embalming fluids. So I actually really, like, going into this match, I really wanted to see if they were able to actually make that adaptation and pull the constructs with the embalming fluids on the pull. We have seen them pull, those embalming fluids got low and they ended up pulling the construct there just for time efficiency's sake, but they ended up not having to do the super aggressive pull like maybe they would have needed to do if they were kind of neck and neck.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just no point right now.
Yeah, no.
There's no point risking anything. You can just pull one trash pack at a time right now. They're nice and ahead and still probably able to close out this map in a safe manner. No point risking a full team death. So the only thing that could really wipe them is a horrible misplay at this point, because they're probably just intelligently not going to put themselves in a position that's risky towards the team. Dealing right now with the 2 interment constructs on the side, making sure that they're near one of the tombs so that when they cast Entomb, the players can be easily and quickly clicked out of there, just to make sure that they can return not only for DPS in the group, but that we don't have the shadow pulsing on there as well.
I think they would actually have to have like 2 full team wipes for them to for 40K to even be able to catch back up. Of course, they ended up skipping that construct on the bridge, which doesn't open up their lowest skip that is just by default in the dungeon. So it doesn't open that up. So they could get punished kind of hard if they do have 1 full wipe. 1 full wipe would not put them as far behind as 40K is currently, but I guess 2 might. But they do proc their 3rd Reaping of the Instance here and pull it into Machimba.
I don't think it's anything we'll see.
No, I don't think so either. Method NA has been playing really well this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this is a solid map from them right now. 1 death on the board only, a bit of a hiccup that they managed to recover from the Gauntlet. But Method NA here, 85% on Machimba, the second boss of the dungeon, with, of course, 65% trash as they cleave the remainder of said 3rd Reaping wave on top of Machimba right now. One of the hardest hitting bosses on the tank, at least in terms of melee, of all the bosses in the dungeon. Just absolutely crushes, but a bit deceiving, of course, because warriors are just so good at physical blockable damage, which is exactly what Machimba's melee is. So not too dangerous unless they get caught off guard without a shield block there. Nerf Clap moving well in position right now as he kites to the other side of the room just to make sure Machimba is met as soon as he stops his Entomb cast, and also is in a position where they can start dropping a lot of those flames to the side of the room. 40K has indeed used their second Bloodlust and is at 44% on Golden Serpent, looking to salvage whatever they can and just rush back towards where Method NA is.
Yeah, Igloo got kind of low there, but they ended up swift bending himself and he ends up okay. Lizelle here sitting at 75% with a Grievous attack, and he has a Golden Serpent on. He might end up going down again. Okay, he does end up getting topped back up, and he's going to end up being all right. As for on the side of Method NA here, they're sitting at 58% on Machimba. They finally killed some of the Reaping mobs, and they're getting those circles on the ground that they need to be dodging out of.
Those swirlies have been a killer. I've noticed a few DPS get hit back and forth here. It's not really that much damage, and the punt is whatever. It's more so the 10% debuff damage per stack. Like, it really does add up. We saw that at the beginning of the first Golden Serpent pull on the side of 40K with Lofus getting that, and he just has such a significant decreased amount of damage done on top of them. But it looks like Machimba has actually, yes, if you didn't know what happens if you don't click your buddy out of the tomb, he spawns a half-eaten zombie friend on the side. Now, not really too dangerous, and they're CCable. The only danger to them, they don't melee the tank hard, they don't fixate anyone. The danger to them really is that they do a cast, and if they get that cast off, then you are, well, you're pretty much screwed at that point. Okay. You're going to fall. It's a, you've never seen one before?
I've literally never seen this before.
Okay, so yeah, you can tank it on top of the boss if you want. I'm kind of surprised,
I mean, I've seen this, I know the mechanic, but I didn't know what it actually did.
Yeah, he just does a massive AoE cast that does a ton of damage to the group, so it's something that you have to interrupt, and it's a fairly slow cast too. I actually dream of a world world one day where they actually let Machimba on purpose spawn these mummies just to maybe bolster some kind of single target damage by having surrounding group members depending on what future metas are going to be. Let me dream, Teddles.
I mean, maybe.
Mummies everywhere, okay? But yeah, so not really too dangerous of a mob. I mean, we always told that, like, oh, make sure you open the tomb, but really, if you fail it, then you see what happens. They just see it on the side anyway and continue about their business with Machimba at 7%.
Yeah, they do a good job of keeping it paralysis. Lighty jumping out of melee range a couple times, just making sure that does get refreshed before it ends up getting broken out. Fourty K here has downed the Golden Serpent finally after the 1400th pull of that, and they are making it onto their gauntlet room.
Yeah, Rentari had just having a bit of difficulty right here. He just can't seem to be healed out by Igloo for his 4-stack Grievous right now, hovering around that 20 to 40% constant bouncing region. Finally managed to heal himself up, spamming some of that Ignore Paint to absorb 50% of that damage coming in as the two Colossi from the start of the dungeon finally invade and parade into the room. Teams making sure, of course, to move out of that frontal shock blast that they do. You don't want to get caught in that. It's a huge stun and a lot of damage. But eyes on Method and A right now as they have down Machimba and have dedicated their Bloodlust to the double Berserker, double Hex Doctor, double Hex Priest, of course, and the Witch Doctor pull here. That's oh so dangerous.
Yeah, making sure that you do get kicks on or spell reflects on those bolts are very important, the spectral bolts. And then the Berserker, of course, puts a bleed on people, but it can be dwarf racial off if we would assume that both of these rogues are dwarf, so making sure that the rogues are standing the closest to those Berserkers whenever they are casting that bleed is very important here. Method in A, I know we talked about on the desk prior to the match, we talked about where we wanted to see their Bloodlust used, and we just kind of talked about the differences here. Method in A here electing to do a double Berserker pull there and popping their Bloodlust as Shakib drops pretty low there.
I was going to say, as Shakib opts to get punched in the face by something. It might have been an arrow coming in from the Beastmaster. Nonetheless, he dips off it low. JB finally heals him up above that 90%, getting rid of the 3-stack of Grievous that he had accrued, and the rest of the group moves out from this Brute, which does have that massive area denial pop-up on anybody that is unfortunate enough to get caught in it. So it throws you fairly high in the air, so not only do you take damage from that, but also fall damage is needed. You can indeed kind of punt it or displace it, as we've seen with the Ring of Peace Ursul's Vortex combo here, but it's only temporary. It only delays that cast just for a moment, so I suppose the melee can try and finish it off if they can. But that was an interesting interaction.
That was neat, yeah.
That was actually neat with the Ursul's Vortex and Ring of Peace combo, kind of almost like triple punted. He kept getting, you could only get sucked in once, but it was still a punt across it, and then it sucked him back in, and then punted him again because he got sucked back in into the Ring of Peace. So cool little trick there, delayed by Method and A. It worked out for them as they managed to get some extra DPS on that Brute and have proc their 4th Reaping on top of the next Berserker / Hex Priest / Witch Doctor pack.
Yeah, they definitely need to make sure that they don't end up getting punted off the edge by the Deadeye shot after the pack after this. On the side of 40 K here, they're still dealing with some of the trash in that gauntlet room. They have finally killed their 2nd Reaping of the instance, as we do see some of those mobs actually going down there, spawning those circles on the ground here, while Method and A here dealing with their 4th Reaping of the instance, finally killing some of these Risen and Tormented Souls here, and the Witch Doctor making sure that it gets interrupted. The Spectral Berserker here leaping here in a second, and it's probably going to put a bleed. It goes on Lighty, which is the least optimal target here, but as long as JB ends up babysitting his health bar here, he's going to be okay.
One bleed stack when they're at full health won't kill them, especially with healing over time running from JB, so it shouldn't be too much of a concern as they do their final pull here to get to 96% trash, getting the double CC on the group just ahead, pulling in the Witch Doctor, the 2 Headhunters, on top of course, the Beastmaster with his Raptor and Hex Priest, cleaving everything down right now. Once they get to 96%, killing the rest of whatever they have in front of them, they will run over past the Berserker, the 2 Berserkers and the remaining Hex Priest, and just Shadow Meld into the boss's room and prepare to pull the first boss.
Yeah, JB doing a really good job of angling that Poison Barrage to where the rest of his group didn't end up getting hit by that. He ended up standing on the gate there while that Poison Barrage ended up casting. It's kind of a conal effect that has to be dispelled once it does hit your targets, and you do see Method in A here going through these mobs. They're going to end up leaping into their council fight room and then popping their Shadow Meld here, while 40 K finally making it on their way to Machimba's room.
They are on the way right now, getting ready to skip the Purification Construct. The Shadow Meld comes up, and they head over to the Ooey Gooey room of Machimba and the Embalming Fluids. Kula, the Butcher, first, of course, now at 90% HP. Severing Axe, definitely the most dangerous, well, I wouldn't say the most dangerous, because if you let Poison Nova going on Zanazal, it's auto-wipe pretty much, but certainly one of the most dangerous, inevitable casts on this and inevitable abilities on this boss. Whirling Axes can be a bit of a pain in the butt, too. You just want to make sure you're avoiding them as they spiral in an increasing circle outwards in the room, but Severing Axe is just a really heavy bleed that goes on a random target. You can, of course, stone form it or parry it should you have something like Blade Dance from a DH, which have not existed at all this tournament yet, but just for future reference. So it seems that they're pretty fortunate with their cast right now.
I'm actually kind of sad that we haven't seen Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter is actually a really good class, but I think it's just kind of overshadowed by Windwalker Monk, as we do see both teams here running this double rogue Windwalker Monk comp. As that axe has gone on to Lighty, one of the least optimal optimal targets here. Obviously, you really, really want it on your 2 rogues because they do have Stone Form, like we said. Lighty does get that Touch of Karma active, as you do actually see it indicated above his head and above Kula the Butcher's head. So that's a massive shield here that's going to redirect his damage taken into Kula. So that's actually going to be a pretty good damage increase for him. 40K, though, they ended up doing that Construct Embalming Fluid pull that we were talking about, where they ended up pulling both of the Constructs into the Embalming Fluids.
Yeah, they have to. The problem is, we've talked about with this dungeon, when you fall behind, it's so hard to catch up.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for creativity. We've mentioned this before. There's not a lot of room of, hey, let's take this kind of risky, sneaky skip. You just have to rifle through the trash. Some of it's gated. You can only pull so much at once, like Machimba's room here. They did what they could. They pulled the Disembalming Fluids along with the 2 constructs on the side. That's all they can really do in this room. They spawn their 3rd Reaping, and the rest is just single target on Machimba until it's dead. The rest, of course, you can try to pull the entire hallway after this, the entire bridge, but you will die very swiftly, as there's probably going to be like 7 Berserkers in there. And so it's a very limited dungeon. Once you screw up here, you're really behind, and you're just hoping the other team has a hard time as well.
Yeah, there's only about 115, 120% maximum that you can actually pull here. So there's not a ton of innovation for strategies, which is the reason of what you end up saying there. Method in A here on Zanzal, they do have the totems out here. They are making their way, making the rounds here. We actually did not see them killing the Lightning Totem yesterday. The Lightning Totem, of course, locking out a healer or any caster whenever it does end up going off. But having a melee heavy group, they end up not electing to not kill it yesterday. But today, they look like they have actually just moved Zanzal around, looking like they're killing it today.
Yeah, no problem for them, as we do know that once one of these council bosses dies, it does reappear occasionally throughout the room in its ghost form, essentially, casting one of its signature abilities, the Whirling Axis in the case of Kula, and when Zanazal goes down, he will spawn randomly in the room, casting the Poison Nova that needs to be interrupted. So just adds a bit of complexity and difficulty for the players that need to pay attention to these bosses doing those abilities, but nothing that these teams can't handle, as Zanazal goes down to 5% right now, sub 10, getting ready to die while they get ready on Aka'ali. That's so much different. Aka'ali, there we go, let's go with that. Aka'ali, the final boss of the kind of council encounter here. Again, nothing too mechanically crazy, pretty sound of a boss, but just a lot of high damage and very mistake unfriendly on this one.
Yeah, this is also a point where JB is actually going to be able to do a pretty decent amount of damage just because of how this barrel through mechanic ends up working. So basically, whenever a person does get targeted with the barrel through, you end up soaking it as a group, and as soon as that Grievous ends up getting topped off here, Aka'ali will end up casting that debilitating backhand and will either put a debuff, which reduces your armor, on Nerf, or he'll probably dodge or parry it or whatever. In that point, JB will actually be able to sit in cat form the whole entire time, DPSing, while Nerf either kites around, or Aka'ali actually doesn't melee very hard, so it's actually pretty easy.
Well, I mean, she does if
you have the debuff.
If you have the debilitating backhand 75% armor reduction debuff, she certainly does. But a lot of reaping, not reaping, but rather Grievous stacks ramping up on the players right now. Good charge here by Nerf Clap to make sure that the Poison Nova is interrupted. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of passive combination of parry and dodge, Nerf Clap probably has like a 1 in 4 chance or so to dodge it if he's lucky enough. So we'll see here if this one manages to get dodged as it goes in right now. Unfortunately not. He has to defensively kite away again, so a bit of a damage loss here for the group, but they can afford it.
Yeah, we actually did see on the side of Method in A, Lighty ended up getting that charge on him, that barrel through, and he ends up having his Transcendence port placed near the edge. He ends up jumping off the edge right as that barrel through ends up charging at him, and then he transcends back onto the platform, canceling that barrel through. You can actually end up doing that if you have any form of movement that can actually get you back on the platform. So if you had like the grapple from the rogues actually can do it, but that's actually kind of risky, like maybe like a disengage from a hunter if we for some reason saw hunters. Demon hunters are actually pretty good at it with vengeful retreat and stuff like that, but by and large we're only going to see it here from Lighty and this Transcendence here.
Didn't realize hunters were still a class in World of Warcraft, but
dead class, unfortunate.
You learn something every day as the classes move forward. The group, the party members move forward right into the Shadow of Azul. We've told it a million times, of course, just how dangerous this guy is. He is very dangerous. Even in an unfortified setting, we have seen tanks drop to this through our series coverage here over the past few weeks. It does happen, but the players are doing well to move away from the pool right now, and JB is just absolutely pumping as many heals as he can into Nerf Clap right now, trying to keep him nice and healthy from those shadow barrages, which not only hit you for a substantial amount of shadow damage, but do leave a pretty nasty resident damage over time effect that we saw, unfortunately, the other day when Divine Field fell while he was just kind of hanging out after Shadow of Azul died, and Elserat just didn't get to him in time. So Healers, their job is certainly not done once this mob falls, so just got to pay attention to that tank afterwards. 40K still moving through the hallway here, just now on the Brute. They've downed Machimba and are just doing what they can.
Yep, and you actually do see on the side of Method in A here that minion of Zul here being paralysis off to the side after Shakib did end up getting that AoE there. JB did a really good job of topping off the group, because during this Grievous affix, it's really hard for you to kind of catch back up if the whole entire group does have too many stacks of Grievous. So playing catch up here, obviously not what you want to do. You want to be topping everybody through 90% health, just getting those 4-stack, 2-stack of Grievous off of people, just making sure that you end up getting it off quick is the most important thing here. As you are seeing Method in A end up shadow melding here, waiting for that minion of Zul to probably make their way over there. Actually, JB does end up getting out of combat with that minion of Zul with his shadow meld here. We've seen it in previous matches where that if that minion of Zul is paralysis or CC'd on the side, it will end up keeping you in combat for prolonged periods of time, but you actually do see them get out of combat here with it.
Yeah, I mean, they want to get out of combat in general because they want to get rid of that 5th Reaping Wave as well, not just the
just the minion.
Yeah, not just the minion of Zul on the side. So the entire team manages to successfully do that. Not a single mob leap towards them as they start off in this first phase of essentially a 4-phase encounter between this general phase, the 2 Raptors, and of course the traps at 40%. So once Kingdazar reaches 80%, not really much changes. Raban comes out, one of the 2 Raptors, will jump around and do his frontal. Just want to make sure to move out of that. 60% is really the toughest part of the fight when the second mounted Raptor comes out. Kingdazar becomes essentially immune to damage. All damage you do to him is redirected into that Raptor mount, and there will be periodic fears coming out of the Raptors. That's usually as expected, where you see teams pop their Bloodlust offensive cooldowns and just try to get through it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, making sure whenever Dazar doesn't end up mounting to Zala, that actually can be kind of scary for your tank if the tank does not end up having a way to get out of the fear. Of course, Warriors do have Berserker Rage, and they're able to actually break out of the first fear that Tazala casts. But if Warriors do get comboed with that Blade combo while that fear is rolling, if they don't have like a very big defensive, they can actually be going down pretty low here. Additionally to that, your DPS or healer could be feared into these tornadoes and requiring them to require a lot of damage, or a lot of healing on them.
Yeah, well, we've seen a bit of sloppy play here. I mean, it's not all sunshine and daisies for the healer at all times, and the tank is safe. Some of the issue really comes with these tornadoes circling the outside of the room. They just do a ton of damage, and especially with Grievous snowballing, you can see actually Lighty and Shakib both having those effects on them. Shakib ends up actually cloaking his off, but Lighty needs a lot of attention paid from JB, who could just be nicely DPSing the boss right now, but is forced on the defensive to heal, unfortunately. So he has to do that, get Lighty out of that Grievous stack, and Lighty once again eats another stack. This time I believe on purpose, though, because it does have that touch of karma. Bloodlust has been, of course, popped. We have killed both Raptors at this point and are heading over to the final phase.
Yep, JB sitting about 50-ish% mana here. The only real issue with this boss in general is because of that Quaking Leap. It does a lot of AoE damage to the whole entire group. So JB has to kind of quickly top the whole entire group, as you actually did see JB use his Cat Form Wild Charge there in order to be able to dodge that Quaking Leap initial damage, which is actually super good for him. But back to my point is that you end up getting Grievous on your whole entire party, and you actually end up having to heal the whole entire group up very quickly, forcing the Resto Druid to end up spending a lot of mana. We've actually seen some Resto Druids in the past, if your group is getting hit by those tornadoes periodically, it's going to cost you to very quickly on this fight.
Yeah, but is certainly not an issue for him right now, as he's 40% mana. Kingdazar at 25% health. They'll be able to close this out in just a moment, but, I mean, just really solid performance out of Method in A. It was looking a bit shaky early on, Tettles. I mean, they finished everything stellar at the first boss, killed the Golden Serpent well. Everything was turning out for them, but it got really scary really quickly early midway through that gauntlet, but they managed to recover with, once again, a great heads-up play, similar to how they did in Underrot, and just avoid the entire full team wipe.
Yeah, I mean, that heads-up play, I mean, while it would not have saved them in this match versus 40K, because 40K's issues on the Golden Serpent were far more massive, it did allow them, and it did show us that the fact that, like, they are able to make these very quick heads-up plays time and time again. Like, we've seen from them multiple times. We saw it in the Underrot with them shadow melding off that maggot, getting that single target res on the Lighty, and that will just be it here for Method in A as they do take the series.
Method in A.
With this light blue color.
Yeah, for sure. Not a lot of the blue class that we've seen here. Of course, we do expect to see them pull a lot of trash onto the Sand Queen. The reason for that being is because of Packed Ice trait, and then they additionally get a ton of Frozen Orbs just because of how much damage the Blizzard ends up doing. Ends up getting their Frozen Orb resets a lot of the time. So it ends up doing a lot of single target damage that we will be seeing from this Frost Mage.
Yeah, so one thing to mention about Method in A here is that Method NA had a super good strategy in Tol'Dagor last cup. Now, we didn't see them play Tol'Dagor this time around yet, this tournament, with these affixes, but the last time around, they were the only team who saved their Bloodlust, did not use it on the Sand Queen, and then later used it on Trash, and they had a really fast Tol'Dagor run. Now, Abrakeydabra did use the Bloodlust here after the upheaval, and we'll see if Method NA is saving their Bloodlust again.
Yep, and it's going to be interesting here just to see how they end up doing with the Jess Hallis room. I know we were pretty critical early on about how Method NA ended up just managing their way through that Jess Hallis room, and it seemed like the last time we did see them in Tol'Dagor versus Method EU, they had shored up all of our questions and concerns with their Tol'Dagor route, and they were actually very good here. Abrakeydabra here, of course, popping their Bloodlust on Sand Queen, and they're just a little bit ahead of Method NA now because of that.
Yeah, Tol'Dagor definitely one of those dungeons where you can bring those special classes, just because Tol'Dagor is a lot different to all the other dungeons. There's the trash that you have to kill. Most of it you're just killing with cannons. So the damage, the AoE damage, doesn't really matter as much in this dungeon at all, because the cannons are there to do the damage for you. So what really matters in Tol'Dagor is control and single target damage. So there's a lot of classes you can do a lot of single target damage, and not just rogues and windwalkers.
Yeah, in addition to that, with it being this with Tol'Dagor being this raging volcanic situation, it doesn't end up like affecting them adversely, as we have seen in the past with a lot of like we've seen some like bursting necrotic situations on Tol'Dagor, and we've seen some large variations of strategy just because of how the affixes end up interacting here. But with a volcanic raging, we shouldn't see it be too difficult for these teams here. Of course, raging can end up costing some people some deaths if the tricks of the trade does end up falling on the cannons, but overall, not too deadly here.
And also the utility really matters here a lot too, especially in the cannon part. The mage just provides the slow, right? And if you can slow the front mobs, and the back mobs can catch up to the rest of them, and the better you group the mobs up, the faster the cannons really are going to kill them off. So we will see how Dr. J does in this mage throughout this dungeon, but yeah, we've seen it already one time by Unfired Up. Unfortunately, I think they lost the dungeon when they played the mage, but we'll see how Abrakeydabra does here, as they definitely do have more boss damage coming in, as they're about to kill the Sand Queen here, as Method NA is still on 7%.
I mean, it's the difference of Bloodlust, though. We actually did not see a ton of trash on the Sand Queen like we initially anticipated. They are not using the strategy that we did see from Leech Boys with Fired Up. I don't think they ended up losing. Leech Boys definitely did not end up losing just because of that pick on Mage. They ended up losing for other reasons. So we're definitely going to be looking to see some special things coming out of the Mage here, as we've been lacking some class diversity here. Method NA and Abrakeydabra both finishing off the Sand Queen here, and they are making their way through the jail right now.
Yeah, so one more thing to mention is that the double rogues are actually also beneficial in the cannon area, because you can have two rogues split up and go in different cannons. We see Laddie actually going down on Method NA. They're just kind of messing up the skip a little bit here. They should be able to still get the Shadow Melt off on the rest of the members and rest them back up, but they actually used a battle rest.
Yeah. That's actually super bad on the side of Method NA, and it looks like Method NA is pulling some trash on this area below Jess Hallis' room, which is something that we actually don't see a lot from most of the teams. Most of the time we end up seeing they end up pulling the trash inside of the Jess Hallis room itself, or they end up just kind of, okay, so Method NA ends up shadow melting off all of that trash, while JB's going to end up casting Mass Res on Yoda. They were actually trying to get all those cages open, and we actually did see something similar from Abrakeydabra. They were trying to get all the cages open possible so that they could get that buff for their group.
Yeah, that's probably what happened.
Okay.
It might have just been intentional by the teams to have the tank gather them up so the rogues can go ahead and open everything. Same with Abrakeydabra having Divine Field die as well. Now, Abrakeydabra did pull the boss through the cage. This is something we've mentioned multiple times. If you use Achievers or something like that, you can actually pull the boss from this side of the room through the cage, and it will just run all the way over here. Now, there are some difficulties if you do this kind of stuff, because you will get trash on top of the boss. As you can see, those shells being casted on the whole trash and the boss at the same time, but you do have the mage who can dispel at least the boss.
That's actually super good. Yeah, Dr. J using that spell steal there in order to be able to take those watery domes away from those C speakers. Method NA here pulling a lot of the trash up in this Jess Hallis area, and they end up using their Bloodlust there. So I think actually the C speaker getting that watery dome cast off and Dr. J being able to spell steal, it's actually going to save them a lot of time. And we've seen a lot of issues with some of the teams allowing that watery dome cast to get off from those C speakers, because pulling the C speakers will end up being super dangerous with Jess, but not for Abrakeydabra here.
Yeah, I actually wonder if if it wouldn't be better for Abrakeydabra if they do a strategy like that to just save their Bloodlust for this kind of pull, because it seems like you get a lot of damage on Jess Howlers, you get damage on the Sea Speakers as well, and maybe there's something to think about it, because you only get 2 Bloodlusts in this instance anyway, and the last one is the one you use for the very last boss. So you have a lot of you can pick and choose where you want to use your first Bloodlust. Really, there's a lot of options, but most of the teams just kind of choose to use it in a Sanguine. Now Sanguine, of course, is also a difficult boss under the tyrannical setting, so maybe they just want to play it safe.
Yep, and we do see Method and A here phasing Jess Hallis at 70% here as the whole entire group does get stunned here. Abrakeydabra, of course, already have phased Jess Hallis, as you do see him running around, opening up a bunch of the cages. On the you can see what what Jess Hallis is ending up doing mirrored on the Method and A side, while Abrakeydabra is just kind of standing here as they did pull it through the cage wall, so they don't end up having to chase Jess around.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of mobs. Divine Field actually going down.
What did he just die
going
to?
Down too. Now they only have 1 rest to get Divine Field back up, but Swagfist they cannot get up. So this is the one problem we've been speaking about this whole time. If you pull Jess Hallis for the cage, there's just so many small things that can wipe you on top of just the boss mechanics, right? As soon as you're in phase 3, you need to drop Bobby, you need to drop Jess Hallis, you need to hide from the flashing daggers, and then if you have mobs on top of it, like those arsonists, as you can see, putting debuffs on literally everybody, putting debuffs on Jay, putting debuffs on Divine Field, it might just be too much for people to handle. As fear goes through, Alstrad is feared, and he's going to die to flashing daggers, and this is going to be a full team wipe coming in from Abrakeydabra here.
Yeah, this is actually not super great on the side of Method and A either. We actually did have the Sea Speaker get a Watery Dome cast all the way through as well.
Nerf died.
Oh, Nerf died. Oh my goodness, they don't have a battle rest for him. This is so bad. So they're looking to actually reset the boss here in order for them to not have to path their way all the way through the upper areas of the cage. It looks like Yoda and Shakib might be able to tank some of these arsonists, even though they are raging, just with some parries. Man, that's actually super bad. And then JB ends up, okay, so JB ended up shadow melding off the trash, and he's going to end up single targeting Res Yoda, while one of the rogues, Shakib, ending up running across to the other side with his parry with all those mobs on him. So JB's going to end up casting a single target Res on Shakib after these arsonists do end up dying. Oh, but the arsonist does end up coming back and putting JB in combat there.
Okay, so that's to finish off this arsonist, which should be fine for them to do with those 3 members alive. So I feel like Method and A losing a little bit less time compared to Abrakeydabra, but both just having to reset the boss, having full wives coming in. Now Method and A didn't have everyone dying because they got the shadow melt off, so they only have 4 deaths compared to 7 deaths on Abrakeydabra side, but both of them have to engage the boss again, and Method and A actually
they got the reaping
wave. So they killed the arsonist to proc the reaping wave, and now they have to deal with the reaping with 2 members down because they don't have a battle rest available to them, and they can't shadow melt rest or anything like that. So they have to deal with this whole wave with 3 members. It should be fine to do because they don't necessarily need a tank, but still just costing them so much time. Well, Abrakeydabra on the other side, they managed to get back up. Alstrad just stealthed all the way through to the boss and got a master rest off, and they pulled Jess Hallis again.
Yeah, that's actually so bad on the side of Method and A. So our initial concerns with Method and A's Tol'Dagor had to do with how they ended up pathing through this Jess Hallis area, and the reason for that was that they ended up pulling the Sea Speaker with a boss a lot of the time, putting that Watery Dome on him. We actually did see Nerf going down just because of how much trash was on top of Jess Hallis, and now Abrakeydabra, even though they also had a wipe on their own, they're back in a better spot than Method and A, as they do have Jess down to 70%.
Yeah, so the difference you can see in trash, 21% versus 12% Abrakeydabra, doesn't really mean that much at all, because you only need approximately 14 to 16% trash. You don't even need to proc your Reaping Wave at all before you go to the cannons. You can do all the Reaping Waves with the cannons later on if you want to. Now, Abrakeydabra is pulling some trash here on top again. They do have the arsonists, they do have the Sea Speakers here, so they gotta watch out. They're doing this exact same pull again. They get a sheep off the Sea Speaker, but apparently there's dots on him as the sheep immediately broke. You can see the Watery Dome coming off. You can see some other rings coming out. They need to somehow handle the Sea Speaker, because if he keeps casting Watery Domes, then they're going to be in trouble again.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, of course, can spell steal a bunch of the mobs in order to be able to get the Watery Dome off of him. So it's actually not the worst possible thing, but leaving it polymorph there is actually significantly superior here. As on the side of Method and A, they have finally phased Jess again. They are making their way down while Jess is running back across these cages, making sure that he opens them up again. And Method and A has some more trash on top of Jess once more. It's actually super bad that they ended up actually procking their 20% reaping there too. So it just cost them so much more time.
Yeah, the problem as well is raging, right? You have these arsonists, even though they're running away, when they're raging, you see Alstrad drop really low, but he might be able to recover here. Okay, so the problem with the arsonists, right? They drop low, they get into raging, then they run away. So basically they don't really attack you anymore once they're fleeing. But the debuffs that they put on people, as you can see, one on Divine Field, for example, right now, and Alstrad going down. I don't know if they can finish up the boss without Alstrad. Just House on 30%, they still have a bunch of mobs alive here. I'm not completely sure if they can do it, as the poison on Dr. J needs to be dispelled by Swagfist. Swagfist can dispel poison. Dr. J going down, Ashan going down. This is going to be a complete team wipe again by Abrakeydabra.
Yeah, this is just so bad for them. Elsarat going down, of course, he's the only one who has access to the battle res on his team, not being able to utilize that in order to be able to res himself back up. Methodene back in the driver's seat again off the back of an Abrakeydabra. Major mistake there. Jess down to 20% here, and they should be finishing off Jess here in just a couple more seconds.
This is really not what we want to see from those two teams. We've kept talking about Abra and Method and A just being those runner-up teams, right? They want to compete with Method U. They want to be on the top. They want to be first. But if they bring performances like this, where they just keep wiping over and over to Jess Howlis, and we've seen this before, right? Okay, we've never seen Abrakeydabra before. We see Elsewhere going down. And they're just losing so much time. Method and A, I mean, we've seen them in Tol'Dagor a bunch of times. They also had problems before in this dungeon where they wiped to Jess Howlis like 3 times in a row or something like that. So we definitely need them to clean up their play here in this dungeon specifically. We see Method and A finally downing Jess Howlis, and now they do a Shadow Meld skip, and now they can finally go to the cannon part.
Yeah, luckily enough, they do have 25% count, as they ended up pulling a bunch of the trash on top of Jess. They ended up wiping because of it, but then after they end up resetting the boss and just kind of getting all that trash down, they only need about 80%. They do end up getting about 80% of their trash just from how the cannon ends up working. As you do see Nerf here, still sitting in that Shadow Meld. He's going to be running through these quarters up here and pulling all that trash to the cannon here in just a couple seconds. Whereas on the side of Abrakeydabra, Elsarat has finally made it back with the rest of his team, and he's casting that mass res.
Yeah, that was very close. Elsarat almost didn't make it there. He was having aggro from all of those mobs, almost dying as he got the Shadow Meld off very last second. So Abrakeydabra is just so far behind at this point. They still have to kill Jess Howlis. The whole boss is still alive. They're still only on 18% trash. While Method and A on the cannon part, they do have the double rogues. So you can see Yoda is out of range right now if you look at the group frames, because Yoda is most likely on the other side dealing with the trash with the cannon on the right side, while Shakib is in the left cannon here, tricksing Nerf, making sure he doesn't get aggro, and just dealing with those officers as they stack up in this corner.
I actually really like that Ring of Peace there from Lighty, and then after that, they do in fact use that Ursul's Vortex in order to be able to keep these mobs grouped up for prolonged periods of time. You do actually see that Typhoon coming in for JB as they have procced their second reaping of the instance. You do actually see some of those souls coming up, hitting Nerf there, and they're actually able to be hit by the cannon as well. On the side of Abrakeydabra, finally phasing Jess Howlis again to 70% health.
Yeah, so Method and A procced their 2 reaping waves here. We see Yoda drop very low, proccing his cheap death, but he should be alright. He is another cannon, as I mentioned before, so his tricks probably dropped from Nerf, and he got aggro from some of those mobs. So he needs to make sure he goes out of the cannon, comes back, puts the tricks again on Nerf, and goes back, or he has his cloak or banish or something available to him. As Method and A is on 73%, and you know, Abrakeydabra is still on the same boss.
Yeah, that's actually kind of scary for Yoda to be doing on his own over on the side. As I say that, he does actually go down. The reason for it's actually super scary is that as soon as that Trix does in fact fade from whoever it ends up being put on, Yoda is liable to take a lot of damage from raging mobs. And like if the mobs end up shooting him or something while they are enraged, he'll probably like instantly die, or he instantly practice cheat death like we did actually see, and he ends up going down because of it. I hope he ended up getting a lot of percent though.
Yeah, so JB actually casted the mass rest, but Shakib was shooting the mobs while JB was resting. JB got incumbent, and then he couldn't finish up the mass rest, but it shouldn't be a big deal at all because we still have one cannon available to them, so they can finish up the rest of the trash here, as Yoda will just be rest afterwards. They did proc the Reaping Wave though, so this means that they have to kill a Reaping Wave before the rest Yoda. I feel like they should have waited, Shakib should have waited until JB got the rest through, because this is just kind of a little bit of a waste of time.
I mean, it's kind of a minor mistake just by Yoda dying, but we do see Abrakeydabra popping their Bloodlust, and Divine Field of Shine and Swagfist dead again. It's going to look like it's going to be another wipe for Abrakeydabra as Trouble in Paradise continues for them with 18 deaths coming in this Tol'Dagor.
Yeah, at this point I just kind of want to have a full screen on Method and A.
I don't know about that.
So far behind. Now we get the rest coming through on Yoda here as they're on their way to get to Valyri. Now after Valyri, they only have 11% trash left. They can deal with that with the other cannon parts right after this boss. They do have the Bloodlust ready as well, but they're most likely not going to use it here. They're most likely saving it for the last boss. As we've seen, multiple teams have trouble on the last boss. Also Method and A, namely. I think they wiped once or at least twice to the last boss, so definitely want to watch out for that. This time around, though, we do have easier affixes for the last boss. We don't have this deadly quaking anymore.
Yeah, there can be some really bad affixes for Overseer Korgus just because of how his Explosive Blast does end up lining up with some of the affixes. But we actually do see Abrakeydabra grouping up his 5 members, no longer having that send Elstrat by himself and make him Shadow Meld and Mass Res us all strategy. They're just grouping back up and trying to take this dungeon slow and steady, while on the side of Method and A, they are at 68% on Sky Captain Valyri.
Yeah, so Valyri, not a very dangerous boss if you don't get hit by those Cinder Flames, as you can see her casting it right now. So she will target a random direction, basically, cast this Cinder Flame, and the barrels that are on the floor, if they get hit by the Cinder Flame, which is a frontal cone, then they will enlighten and they will explode after a while. So what you want is you want your healer to kind of just pick up the barrels and move them in a safe place, so you don't have you do have space left once they explode, because if they're all across the room and they're all explode at the same time, you might just not have any space left where you can stand. Yeah,
we've actually seen JB picking up a few barrels here, positioning them really well around the room, making sure that they're all standing in corners. The only dangerous part about the barrel mechanic on this Sky Captain Valyri fight is chaining them infinitely. You can actually catch yourself in an infinite loop if you accidentally position the barrels poorly. So making sure that you actually do position them well, and as you have been seeing JB do, just kind of grabbing them, moving them out of the Cinder Flame, or moving them into the corners where he does actually want them positioned, has actually been super good on the side of Method and A. Abrakeydabra hitting 27% trash here as they are still back, and they look like they made it back to the Jess Hallis room. Oh, okay, no, they're going up the stairs finally.
Yeah, so they're in 31% trash. They have to deal with all of this because not only they're missing one rogue, right? So they're missing one Shroud, and Shadow Melt has a 3-minute cooldown, so at this point they just need to deal with the trash, they need to get over with and just play it slowly. Method and A, on the other hand, of course, 10% left on Valyri, and that is all that's going to matter for them is to kill the last boss. They can probably even wipe once or twice to the last boss and still be able to do it, as Abrakeydabra didn't even kill Jess Hallis yet, but let's just hope they do it cleanly, as they do have the Bloodlust ready. Valyri going down at this point. Now, we have seen some different strats where some teams will just skip the trash and go to the boss first and then backtrack, or they just deal with the trash now and then go to the boss.
Yeah, I kind of wish we actually saw what Dr. J was actually planning with this Frost Mage, try to actually see where exactly it ends up getting time back for them. Of course, on the Sand Queen, it was kind of neck and neck. We actually had very similar kill times for both teams there, even though Jay did have some trash pulled into the Sand Queen. Of course, Frost Mage does get a decent amount of single target just because of how their AoE to single target conversion ends up working, but at the same time, that's definitely not the reason that they're playing the Frost Mage. And I kind of wish that I saw how they ended up dealing with their cannons, but at the same time, they've just been making a mess out of Jess Hallis. And Method and A here, one last mob left before they do proc their Reaping. They end up paralyzing it and entangling Rooted. They're going to end up shadow melding that one last mob off, as they don't want to deal with their last Reaping of the instance as they are on to Overseer Korgus.
Yeah, I feel like maybe Method and A should have just dealt with the Reaping Wave already before they went to the last boss, just to not have any shenanigans happen here at this point. But either way, they probably practiced a lot, so they know what they're doing. They did engage the last boss here, pop their Bloodlust as well. And now all you want to watch out for is, of course, the Explosive Burst. As you can see, go out on 3 members here. Just does an insane amount of initial damage, and then it leaves a ticking dot behind. It does a lot of damage too. Now, depending on the rotation of the boss, you can get 2 of them in a row very fast, meaning that if you didn't heal up the dot from before, then you might be still low HP and you might get one-shot by the second one.
Yeah, and it should be coming in here. The double should be coming in here in just a second, like you were speaking of, as it does go. Oh, it actually is only scary for JB as he is getting the Explosive Burst every single time. It is random for the melee and the tank, since you are running a triple melee composition. Abrakeydabra here procking their second Reaping of the instance as Overseer Korgus, the final boss of the instance for Method and A, is down to 67%.
Yeah, so you want to watch out here for the Deadeye cast, basically. The Deadeye cast kind of resets the rotation of the boss, of the abilities, and if you get an Explosive Burst after the Deadeye, that means you're going to get a double explosive. So, so far they only got 1 on Method and A side, so they have been so somewhat lucky, but now they have to see how to do the rest of the percentage.
If you actually looked at Abrakeedabra's screen there just a second ago, there was actually some guy crying on screen. So big shout out to the ops team for that. Unfortunate for Abrakeydabra, as Method in A down is getting Overseer Korgus down sub 50% here.
Yeah, so Method in A, of course, still needs to do the 2% trash right after this boss. We saw them to see one of those mobs and Shadow melted afterwards. Now, that's the only thing they have to deal with, which they can kill with the cannon, so it's really not going to take them a very long time at all. Now, but they're still on this boss, and the longer this boss...
Oh my gosh, JB actually goes down!
Do not have a rest, so this is going to be a full team wipe coming in. There's no way they can do 40% of this boss without rest, without a healer. That's just impossible. So they're gonna have to reset. They're gonna go again. But again, Abrakeydabra is so far behind. They have another chance, right? They can go again. They can even go twice if they want to. But they gotta watch out, because at some point they need to kill this boss. Abrakeydabra, of course, still working on this dungeon.
I'm kind of confused as to what that sync up was. So he had the explosive blast, and then he had the Deadeye shot casted on himself at the exact same time that he had the explosive blast, and he just got comboed and he got hit 100-0 there, as Method in A actually does proc their last reaping of the instance. Fortunately enough, they do respawn at Captain Valeri's room, so they only have to deal with that. They only have to deal with that reaping. Honestly, I think they could wipe on this boss like 3 or 4 more times and probably still beat Abrakeydabra.
Yeah.
We could see a Buon Samdi run here for Method in A, and they might beat them, but of course we don't really want to see that. So yeah, Method in A here using the cannon in order to be able to deal with the last couple of reaping mobs, and then they're going to be making their way back to Overseer Korgus. Unfortunately, they will not have Bloodlust available for this one, though.
Yeah, so the thing is, they don't have Bloodlust this time, just making this fight so much harder, because you don't have Bloodlust, everything takes much longer, maybe the healer runs out of mana. Now we also don't have the double cheat death from the rogues as well. Now Ladi also has a debuff on him from the smash, reducing his HP by 20%, and Nerflet does not have his cheat death trinket available either. So this is definitely going to be more difficult for them now to kill this boss. They have to hope to not get a lot of doubles to be able to kill this boss here, really.
I wonder what's a stronger curse, Method in A always second, or Method in A's Tol'Dagor here, as Method in A has pulled Overseer Korgus once again, and like you said, just really hoping for not a bunch of doubles here. Abrakeydabra down to 40% on Jess Hallis, as they do have 51% of their count for the dungeon here.
Yeah, 51%. Wow,
that's a lot of trash.
That is a lot of trash. Anyway, Korgus on 84%. They did have a pretty significant initial burst as they were pulling the boss, even without the Bloodlust. As you can see, the Windwalker and the Double Rogue doing a lot of damage here. But yeah, it's really just going to be about the doubles and how fast they can kill this boss without the Bloodlust, because we talked about this. It's very healing intensive fight, especially if you get a lot of doubles. And if your healer runs out of mana and the boss is not going to die any second, then there's definitely a possibility of wiping another time. Or if JB dies again, because they have 2 battle rests available to them, but JB can't rest himself when he's dead, and there's no other class that can rest.
Yep, and Abrakeydabra here has Jess Hallis down to 7% health, so they're going to be downing the bane of their existence in this Tol'Dagor run in just a couple more seconds, and they will be making their way through the rest of the instance shortly, as Method in A here sitting on Overseer Korgus, the final boss of the instance, at 60% health.
Okay, let's see, Deadeye and double. Okay, so let's see if JB can heal this as they get a double. He did use his Innervate here. He goes into bear form right before the explosive goes off. Now he needs to heal everyone up before they get the second one. Thankfully, Shakib did not get in a second explosive burst on him. As we talked about it, the explosive burst favors ranged DPS, or ranged in general. But JB is the only range, so JB will get it every single time, but the other 2 are random. Meaning that even if you get doubles, it might not be as bad, because you can get 1 on your tank and 1 on your Windwalker, for example.
Yeah, and here comes another double, yeah, but JB does have Tranquility available for this, so this is actually not too bad. Honestly, as long as JB makes sure that he is the last one to live, that is actually the most important thing, because he is the bearer of the battle res for this composition for Method in A. Nerf, of course, standing in front of that Deadeye shot, soaking it for JB as the explosive burst does come out, and another double here for Method in A. So this is actually very, very unlucky on their side.
Yeah, they gotta watch out here.
Oh my goodness, everybody's so low.
Lady might die here as he's really low, and ooh, he just barely survives here. Now, this is the problem with the mana again. I've been talking about this. If they get a lot of doubles in a row, it's gonna be so mana intensive for JB to heal the people up so fast, having to use so many regrowths, and they get another double here.
Double?
So this might be very dangerous for them as they're running out of defensive cooldowns early. The boss is still on 27% HP. Shakib very low here, and see if he can manage to. He just barely manages. He didn't have his cloak ready, does not have cheat death, but JB managing to keep his group alive here as the boss on 21%. Now on tyrannical setting, 20% is still quite a lot if they don't have cooldowns ready.
Yeah, JB cranking through 40k HPS for the whole entire fight here without Bloodlust is actually a steep steep task to ask of him. And this is actually just a super scary fight just because of how many doubles they have ended up getting. That is just actually just so lucky. I'm sure JB is screaming in comms about how many doubles he's ending up getting here. But they are going to be downing Overseer Korgus here in just a couple more seconds. Whereas on the side of Abrakeydabra, they're finally making their way close to the cannon room.
Yeah, so finally MOTHERLOAD is about to kill the boss here, and they're going to be the winner of this very first game between those two. But goddamn, it was messy between those two teams. Run with only like very minor mistakes coming in, so we'll see. This might just be a very close match between those two teams. Yeah,
bolstering Atal'Dazar is definitely one of the more scarier dungeons, and you're going to see probably differences in how you end up doing these first pulls, as you actually do see Abrakeydabra ending up paralysing the Augur, not pulling that Confessor in. While it looks like on the side of MOTHERLOAD, they have actually elected to pull that Confessor into the pack, probably not, or pulling the Augur into the pack, probably not electing to pull that Confessor in though.
Yeah, so Abrakeydabra choosing to see the Augur, but saving their Bloodlust in the process. So they have one less mob in here, having one less caster to deal with, not needing those interrupts. But they are saving their Bloodlust, so they might just be a little bit slower on the pull, but having their Bloodlust later on for probably Rasan with Reaping.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be thinking about. And additionally, with this bolster affix, basically once you do kill mobs, if you do kill them desynced, they will end up giving health and damage to the other mobs around them. And that's actually something that you definitely need to be looking out for. You'll see the mobs get a little bit bigger here. This is actually a kind of a scary dungeon for bolstering just because of how these Sards, these low health Sards do litter around here. As you do see Nerf here making his jump successfully onto this snap spot. You actually do see him throw his weapon here as all the Sards do get teleported to him. One of the rogues off to the side using tricks of the trade on him as well, as you do see Lighty here standing on top of this edge, casting Fist of Fury into all of these Sards as they do go down very quickly here on the side of MOTHERLOAD, as Abrakeydabra mirrors a very similar pull there.
Yeah, the problem here with this kind of snapping spot is the tank is taking so much damage from the swords, and if you don't kill the swords at the very same time, they're going to bolster each other, and they're going to do even more damage. But both of those teams actually pulling the snap spot up perfectly, as they both triggered their 20% Reaping Wave. They jump down to the boss, engaging the boss. Abrakeydabra does have their Bloodlust ready. We'll see if they end up using it in this fight or if they save it for a trash pull later on.
Yep, it looks like MOTHERLOAD here is about 10-ish% on the boss ahead of Abrakeydabra, so making sure that Abrakeydabra is actually going to be able to bridge that gap is actually very important here. We do expect them to pull two of the Sky Screamers off to the side into this pack after they do end up dealing with the Reaping, but right now this is actually very scary for the tank on the side of MOTHERLOAD, with Nerf having some stacks of the Reaping dot plus that Razan bleed that is actually very scary for him.
Yeah, so Abrakeydabra did end up using this Bloodlust here to just single target Rasan here. The problem is they're still kind of behind in damage. As you can see, the boss HP is still being in favor of MOTHERLOAD. Now this is a 45 setting, so the HP is not super huge from Rasan, so any sort of difference in percentage might not be as big as it's on a tyrannical setting, of course.
Yeah, I actually like how both teams additionally have pulled the reanimated Raptors on top of Rasan after the Reaping has been killed. The reason for that being is the Outlaw Rogues do get a single target benefit, somewhat just because they do have a second target in order to be able to proc your Keep Your Wits About You trait. So that's just something to be keeping in mind. Abrakeydabra and MOTHERLOAD here trying to min-max as much as possible. On the side of MOTHERLOAD, they have pulled the Sky Screamers into Rasan. Maybe a little bit too early because the Sky Screamers' health relative to Razan's health is significantly different, and if they ended up killing the Sky Screamers a little bit early, you would end up bolstering Rasan, but I do expect MOTHERLOAD knows what they're doing.
Yeah, when it comes to pulling the Sky Screamers, you obviously do not want to bolster Rasan. The problem is you also don't want to pull them too late because then it's inefficient.
Yeah.
So for efficiency, you'd rather pull them too early rather than too late. And the problem is, of course, the pursuit that the boss does, where he targets a random member and he will follow them. Now, if the boss goes up these stairs, he follows you up the stairs, he will reset immediately. And you don't want the boss to despawn, especially when he's so low HP. So maybe a pursuit just came out, and maybe that's why they pulled the Sky Screamers, as they finish off the boss first. So MOTHERLOAD actually killing the boss first, finishing off the Sky Screamers is well done by them, very efficient, and they're on their way to the next trash.
Yeah, they actually got 10% ahead of Abrakeydabra there with their Razan kill. So we do see MOTHERLOAD after finishing off Razan, they are making their way up towards the Volcall trash. They're likely to CC some of these honor guards here as to not have to deal with them. These honor guards, of course, are very scary for your tank. They have a lot of health, and in addition to that, they do put goop on the ground as well as soon as you do kill that reanimation totem that is attached to the honor guards here.
Yeah, we're going to see a very similar strategy from both of those teams. The only difference we see right now is that Abrakeydabra is 2% behind in trash because of this Augur that is received on the first trash pull that they didn't pull. Otherwise, they're going to do the same pull here as to see the double honor guards, as to steal one of the shield bearers. And you definitely got to watch out here for the witch doctors, which are they cast some very nasty casts like the Venom Bolt and the Hex as well, so you want to make sure you interrupt them. And you also want to make sure you kill all those mobs at the same time because of the bolstering, of course.
Yeah, of course, those shield bearers there casting that Bulwark of Juju, forcing you to interrupt with either a paralysis, which they actually don't have available because they're using it to CC mobs, maybe like a gouge or any of the between the eyes stuns that the rogues do have available. Method NA has elected to use their Shroud here as they are shrouding their way to Volcall. Abrakeydabra finishing up the pack that Method NA had just finished up with in just a couple seconds here, as they did actually Shadow Meld off those CC'd mobs.
Yeah, so Abrakeydabra needs to do catch up here. As Method NA already engaged Volcall, Abrakeydabra just now finished the boss. They need to shroud here. They need to be faster if they want to if they don't want to lose 2-0 to Method NA here, as Method NA is in Volcall. Now, this boss not very dangerous in a fortified setting, and none of the affixes really matter that much either. Quaking should be alright as long as it's not a tyrannical boss fight. In this first phase, you have to deal with those totems, and you basically just want to kill them within a couple of seconds of each other, because if you don't, then they will actually heal. And if you have any of those totems alive, then the boss will not be active.
Yep, and making sure as soon as you do end up killing those totems, Volcall, of course, will actually be going down pretty quickly because he does do a pretty significant amount of damage to himself, allowing your DPS to be able to hold damage cooldowns for the pack after Volcall. Basically, on the staircase, there are 2 Shadowed Stalkers and then a 4-pack at the bottom of the staircase, and pulling all of that trash together is actually pretty scary, so you're going to be likely seeing Method NA here electing to just hold their cooldowns here and then popping them whenever they do see fit on that big trash pack after this. Very similar story for Abrakeydabra here. They are getting down those reanimation totems in a couple seconds.
Yeah, we saw some teams have trouble with this pack that you've been talking about, so this is most likely why we see the team save some of their cooldowns, and this is why the phase 2 might take a little bit longer, just because they don't want to really put too much damage into this mob as they go on and do this very dangerous trash pull. Now, it's so dangerous because of the double casts. You're going to see right after this boss as they're going to stealth past the next trash and just pull 2 stalkers on top of the double casters and the shield bearers. Now, the casters are dangerous because they constantly cast the Venom Blast, they constantly cast Hex, and they just need so many interrupts. And at some point, even if you have a full melee lineup with so many interrupts and so short cooldown on the interrupts, you still just have we see JB going down, but the boss is going down too, so they can rest him back up. It's not going to cost them too much time, but definitely got to watch out for stuff like that because Abrakeydabra is not that far behind.
Yeah, JB just got quacked there by his group. It looks like him and a couple other people were standing on top of one another, so they ended up soaking that Quaking together. Quaking most of the time is like a non-affix for something like an Atal'Dazar, but with it being bolstering and with those Sards, sometimes it can get kind of scary if you get a bad overlap here. Lighting and Nerf not topped up here as they do pull it into these pack, and like you were saying, these Witch Doctors are incredibly scary, and the reason that additionally that they're scary on a bolstering setting is because they want to be high priority, so you want to kill them instantly, but since it is bolstering, it's not damage efficient for you to kill them instantly, and then it puts your tank in a significantly scarier position, as you do see Shakib and Yoda getting kind of low there.
Yeah, Shakib and Yoda both got hit by this Venom Blast, and the Venom Blasts are random too, so they might target the same person at the same time from both Witch Doctors, or you get hit twice in a row, so you definitely want to watch out for those, and you definitely do not want to bolster the Witch Doctors either, so you want to make sure you kill them first, and depending on how efficient you want to be and how risky you want to be, you can try to have the Witch Doctors die at the same time with the rest of the mobs. As you see Abrakeydabra doing the exact same pull here, they need to kill one more mob to get the 40% Reaping wave, while Method NA already got this wave. They're pulling it on top of the Swords here, which is a lot of AoE damage, so you gotta watch out for the HP of the group here.
But I love how they end up CCing that Sky Screamer off to the side there. He has a blind on him, so it's just the Sards plus that Reaping. Of course, the Sards being incredibly scary during this bolstering affix just because of the disparity of health that they do end up having to these Sky Screamers that they normally end up getting pulled with. So Method NA electing to just pull that 1 Sard pack, and it looks like somebody fell off on the side of Method NA. So Yoda is going to take a trek, and he's going to end up coming back here in just a couple seconds as Lighting goes down, and Shakib ends up proccing his cheat death because there aren't enough targets here for those Sards in order to be able to jump on, as they actually have bolstered here a couple stacks.
Yeah, so this is actually costing them way more than it should have. Yoda just falling off, really. This really shouldn't happen to them. And as you mentioned, the less targets there are for the Swords to jump on, the more damage those targets are going to get. and this is why Lady goes down, just because Yoda was not there. He fell off. Now, they do have an additional death on their board, so they have 2 deaths compared to 0 on Abrakeydabra, which is a 10-second difference. Of course, Abrakeydabra is still slightly behind, as there's still 3% trash behind, but that's definitely something that they have to stop doing. They have to do cleaner pulls here.
Yep, Lady actually got incredibly low there, popping his touch of Farman
again.
Scare. That was unfortunate as well. I think both of the rogues fell off.
No, it was only Shakib.
Okay, it was only Shakib that fell off. Okay, so that's unfortunate, as Shakib is making his way back here, taking a long route here back to the Sard pack. As long as nobody ends up going down on the side of Method NA, it will be okay. They do end up proccing their 3rd Reaping of the Instance, and some just unconventional issues here on the side of Method NA.
You definitely gotta watch out with those edges and with this gravity that is a thing that actually pulls you on the floor if you're in the air. So Abrakeydabra is on 59%, 59% trash. They need one more mob to proc their 60% Reaping Wave. While Method NA already has the Reaping Wave that they're fighting with right now. We see Divine Field actually falling down too. What is going on?
Oh no, and all the Sards stepped him. Divine Fields might go down here.
Oh no.
Oh my
what
lord.
A
And now the Sards teleport to Swagfist and instantly killed him. Oh my goodness.
I don't even know
What
what's
is happening?
anymore. People are just falling off the edge in both
Slippery
of those
ledge.
teams. So Divine Field, okay, so the rogues falling off from Method NA definitely cost them some time because they need to go all the way up. But the tank falling off the edge is a huge difference, right? They can't continue to pull, and Divine Field is the one who has aggro. So if he falls down, then all the mobs are going to teleport to him, and then he's the only one down there, so he can't deal with it. He's out of range of healing and so on. So this definitely costs Abrakeydabra a lot of time, not as much as Method NA on the other side. Method NA already continued on. They're on the Sky Screamer plus Honor Guard pull, and once they're done with this, they're going to go onto Yasma's room.
Yeah, they've actually been doing a really good job of keeping even DPS here, making sure that those bolt string stacks do not get up too high here. They did end up proccing the Reaping and pulling a couple of those Tormented Souls into that blast pack. Method NA's pathing here was actually, okay, so all memes aside, their pathing was actually pretty good with how they were ending up CCing the Sky Screamers and how they ended up shadow melding it off. Obviously, it was plagued with some external issues that we were talking about here, but overall, I actually liked how they were managing their way through the room itself, as Method NA is jockeying for position here, about to pull all this trash in front of Priestess Alunza all at once.
Now, this is one additional thing we should mention with their snapping. Now, we've talked about snapping, right? As soon as you're in an area where there's no path available for the mobs to reach you, they will teleport to you. And this is why we see them jump on these ledges. We see the mobs teleport to them whenever you have aggro. Now, there's multiple things that can go wrong with this. Not only can the tank die, which we've seen before, but you can also fall off. And it's going to cost you so much time. So this is why the snapping thing definitely is not as easy and doesn't save you that much time as you might think, because there's so many things who can go wrong, and we've seen it here by both of those teams. As Method NA did prop their Bloodlust here for this huge pull, and they managed to finish up all the mobs as they engage with Priestess Alunza and the Reaping Wave.
Yep, they do get their last Reaping of the Instance proc there. I don't know why it says 95%. They definitely have their last Reaping Wave active right now, as they have pulled the Reaping into Priestess Alunza. So most of the time we have seen a lot of teams electing to use their Bloodlust for Yasma for whatever reason, just because it is a little bit more damage efficient and it allows your melee a little bit higher uptime in order to be able to burn them. But on the side of Method NA here, they do elect to do a little bit bigger of a pull. They end up pulling some of the mobs off to the left side with the Juggernaut and that Augur, and they end up just doing a sizable pull here, and it just allows them, even though they did end up using their Bloodlust, it allows them to get the last couple of percent that they need very quickly.
Yeah, so the 95% here, the only other mob that they need is the Augur that they probably secede to the side here. There's one caster mob that they usually only want to pull it. Oh, okay, there we go. So there's the caster, they pulled it from the left side here. This is the, I think it gives 2%,
yeah.
So they're going to be a 97 after this Augur. And then the only thing left for them to kill to get the 100% is the Sky Screamer, which they will pull up to Yasma to the last boss. Abrakeydabra did not use their Bloodlust for this huge trash pull, and they're done with it right now, and they're going to engage the boss as well.
Yeah, so I actually think I misspoke. I actually think that was their 4th Reaping of the Instance that they ended up pulling into Priestess Alunza. I thought they ended up proccing their 100%, and that's why all those Reaping ended up spawning. Abrakeydabra here engaging with Priestess Alunza, as Method NA has just recently downed it, getting to 97% here, so they just need a couple more mobs before the end of the dungeon with Yasma as well.
Yeah, so Method NA definitely ahead here. They're not too far ahead because Priestess Alunza actually dies pretty quickly because of this transfusion, just kind of killing herself over time. But still, Method NA just on their way to Yasma. Well, Abrakeydabra is still working on this boss and working on the last percentage that they need. So it's definitely Method NA in the driver's seat here. They're the ones who can win this dungeon and can 2-0 Abrakeydabra, moving on to fight Method EU again in that grand final. So Method NA just waiting here for the RP to be over so they can fight the last boss, Yasma.
Yeah, this is actually going to still be a pretty quick run for Method NA, even though they did have a couple of mistakes there in the middle part of the instance here. Of course, they do not have their Bloodlust available for them, while Abrakeydabra ends up, they do end up having their Bloodlust available, but at this point, they seem like they're just a little bit far behind. We talked about Method NA's 3-match series is a lot, and they've actually just come in, and they ended up having just a little bit cleaner of a run than Abrakeydabra in both Tol'Dagor and now in Atal'Dazar, as Yasma has been engaged and is now down to 85%.
Yeah, so the only thing that I can really see causing problems here for Method NA on this boss is the Skyscreamer. Now, we've talked about this multiple times. Usually people just have the Skyscreamer here in this room, have it seat somewhere in a corner, and then when the boss drops low, they will engage the Skyscreamer at the same time as Yasma, just to be efficient and kill both at the same time. Now, the problem with the Skyscreamer is, there he goes. You're actually dropping really low as he got hit by one of those spiders, but the problem with the Skyscreamer is that you need to interrupt it, right? So once they want to engage the Skyscreamer, they need to interrupt the boss and the Skyscreamer at the same time.
Yeah, Lighty does a really good job there of taunting off that Skyscreamer off of one of the rogues, I think it is, who had threat on it, and then he ends up paralysing it away from Yasma there in order for them to be able to kind of move around the room here. You do see that Ring of Peace coming out here on that Soul Rend cast whenever you do see those reflections of all those members of the party there. As you do actually see the melee members of Method NA, they're kind of dipping really close to those spiders, whereas on the side of Abrakeydabra here, they have recently engaged Yasma using their Bloodlust here.
Yeah, so Abrakeydabra, it's too little too late. They're going to be far behind at this point. Even if they do have the Bloodlust ready, they're not going to be able to catch up the 40% boss HP difference at this point, unless Method NA makes a mistake. And the most difficult phase of the boss is still going to happen when they, if they choose to engage the Skyscreamer with Yasma at this point. I feel like Method NA, they could just play it safe, just kill the boss first, and then kill the Skyscreamer afterwards, just to play it safe, because they can afford it.
Yeah, so the reason that the Skyscreamer is so dangerous with Yasma is because Yasma requires a kick on herself. She has the Racking Pain cast that most of the time the tank ends up getting. In addition to that, the Skyscreamer ends up having that AoE fear that we talk about oh so much. And then whenever you do get that Soul Rend, all of your melee have to be out of melee range of the boss because they are dropping that Soul Rend far away from Yasma. So they won't be in melee range in order to be able to kick that fear. Then if Yasma does cast that Racking Pain, that does also need to get interrupted. That could actually be deadly for one of the members of Method NA here. But it looks like right here they are getting Yasma down to a couple percent. They do get an interrupt there on the Skyscreamer, and it's just a couple more percent, and then the Skyscreamer death will seal the deal for Method NA here.
Yeah, so they're not playing it safe. They did engage the Skyscreamer, they did kill the boss here, and all is left to do is kill the Skyscreamer, and they're going to be winning against Abrakeydabra 2-0. Just very nice performance by Method NA here.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anybody really expected a 2-0 from Method NA, but it's definitely a surprise to see for them.
Yep.
Pulls, but we also saw them do those riskier pulls from Method EU and failing to them. They had some full team wipes coming in on Method NA side, trying to mimic the strategy of Method EU. So we'll see how they do this time around, as they both engage the Triad boss, use their Bloodlust, and pull the trash from the left into the right on top of the boss.
Yeah, no surprise. We're going to see really similar strategies coming out of these teams early, as Nerf Clap chunks quite low already on the Method NA side, making sure to move out of the exploding bile from those bile toads on the ground. Method EU already moving over to Sister Milady in the phase 1 right there, as Method NA follows suit. So these teams obviously pretty neck and neck. We just started the match here, but it's going to be all about the trash, especially in the courtyard coming up.
Most definitely, especially in this fortified Raging Grievous affix combination. It's just the Nerf Club actually dropping very low on Method NA side. I hope they can recover here, as he's just has so much Grievous stacks. He has the other debuffs on him. It's just so hard for JB to heal him back up here, but they should be able to recover as the Bloodlust is still going.
Yeah, JB certainly on the back foot here right now, just barely finally getting Nerf Clap over that 90% threshold for Grievous. Azalea is certainly having a much easier time, even able to put out just a bit of damage here and there. Well, as you can see, those Wraths being spammed into Solina for the second round of the Witches here in the Triad. Final she'll go down in just a moment as Method NA approaches Solina as well, trying to beat that next Mind Control, and they actually managed to do it, so they've caught up just a bit to Method EU, and JB has finally managed to stabilize the group.
Yeah, so Gingy actually getting Mind Control on Method EU side. You usually don't want your Rogue to get Mind Control because they do so much damage. We've seen people just get one-shot by a Mind Control Rogue in the past, so definitely luck by Method EU to not have anyone die here as the Rogue on Mind Control. They only have Sister Briar left here as well for Method NA, but Method EU just slightly faster. Just
slightly faster than their NA counterpart as Sister Briar goes down here. Now, we know Method EU is going to grab, if I'm not mistaken, 2 guards, 2 captains, and they're going to bring them right over, including the Rune Weaver, if I'm not mistaken, and they're going to bring them right over to the beginning of the dungeon in the lobby and cleave them down with the essences there. Now, we are in that Raging Affix, so this is where it starts to get really quite hairy. Don't say anything, Ingrid. or quite hairy for the tanks as things will start to enrage. So sub 30%, they will deal 100% increased damage. A lot of danger that comes in for the tanks. So at some point, they're going to have to play a fair bit defensively, start kiting, and getting peel support off of their team in the form of ROPs, Ursul's Vortex, Typhoons, etc.
Yeah, this build is pretty smart just because of the fact that the Solar Senses actually do have quite a lot less HP than the rest of the mobs that he pulled on top here. So the raging will be staggered. Not all of the mobs will rage at the very same time. You get the Solar Senses first, and then you will get the rest of the mobs afterwards. So you don't have to deal with all of it at the very same time. Once those guards and the captains are raging, you can see the ring of pieces come out to be sure that the tanks are allowed to kite and have some more room, because they just do so much tank damage.
They do a huge amount of tank damage. Not seeing too many soothes come out of the rest of Druids right now. If they soothe some of these remaining mobs, then the tank can actually quite safely go back in and help with the damage, but they're choosing to just DPS instead. So whatever works best for them, as Zayla is pumping just a bit of healing to now. Now, important to note here that Nerfclap did proc his Bonsomni's Bargain trinket, that cheat death trinket, earlier on the very beginning of the fight that we saw with Sister Selena, where JB fell behind. So not going to have that available for what will be quite heavy tank pulls coming up with Soul Goliath once they proc that second Reaping. But first Reaping comes first, so 19% on the board for both teams. We're going to see this first Reaping procced here in the courtyard with this quite massive pull coming out of both sides.
Yeah, we see Method and actually doing a little bit of a bigger pull as to pull one Thorn Shaper on top of this pull, as Method EU does not pull the Thorn Shaper. They are in front of the Goliath here. So Method A slightly bigger pull, just one more mob compared to Method EU, but still a huge pull coming out. You do need to see the Soothe coming out, and also just AoE control, AoE to see from those teams as all of those mobs start raging at the same time. We see the Reaping Wave also come into this courtyard, and just the Ring of Pieces and AoE stance come out.
Method and A finally dealing with their first Reaping Wave, as Method EU does the same thing. 28% apiece for both of these teams, really neck and neck here. No deaths across the board. Just the only difference really is Nerfclap's trinket not being available for tanking. Could be quite relevant coming up for that second Reaping with the Soulbound Goliath, making sure that all the trash they kill sits here in the courtyard, so that all of the Reaping that spawns in the second wave is from the courtyard, and they don't risk a despawn on the Soulbound Goliath when they do pull it along with Matron Brindle.
Yeah, we see the Reaping Souls are about to die for both of those teams. Method is slightly ahead in trash percentage here, but both of those teams do have to clean this courtyard. I'm not completely sure if Method EU will pull the Thorn Shapers in the back corner. We've seen Method NA pull these before, so you can see those double Thorn Shapers there, but Method EU kind of choose to not pull them, as they actually do a huge pull from the inside out, as now just went inside, pulled some of those mobs out. You see the Ring of Peace helping there to kind of stack them up and also make the Gorgers not jump around.
Yeah, Method EU misses one of the Infest casts. It does infect now, so 2 more maggots will spawn in just a moment there as the Thorn Shaper finally gets killed for them and does pass off its... I thought it got Soul Fetish off. Okay, so I guess not. It must have killed it right before it got off. So none of these Gorgers have a Soul Fetish buff. Fortunate enough for now. Don't want that extra damage and haste on the mobs. Lighty taking just a fair bit of damage here from the Method NA side, of course, with all the random spit debuffs that go out from the Magus, but they do well to interrupt those Infests and not get any of the players infected with a double Maggot spawn. We do have the pull in the corner, Nagura, as you were mentioning, for the triplicate mobs from Method NA side, looking to proc their second Reaping and get started on that Soulbound Goliath, but Nerfclap getting a bit smacked around by these raged mobs as Method EU procs their second Reaping.
Yeah, so Method is going to pull the mini boss plus the boss here at the same time with their 40% Reaping Wave. Now this is a very difficult pull, and you got to watch out for Now's HP, because he's the one who needs to tank all this damage. This mini boss specifically with the Thorn Barrage, as you can see it go off, just so much damage on top of having the Reaping debuffs, on top of having the boss hit you. So just got to watch out for his HP here.
Yeah, but Fragments, of course, makes quick work of those mobs. You can see the mass amount of unholy DK damage coming out there. The only thing left is just a bit of health on Matron Brindle. That was, of course, soothed off when she enraged at 30% by Zelia, so quite safe for the tank here. Now will, of course, stay in front of the boss and not reset it in the fire for as long as possible, just to make sure that everyone can stay in there. DPS, Zelia is not taxed with healing, and he too can DPS, but at some point those stacks will get out of hand and we'll need to go in. Shakib taking a bit of a hit there, pops his own CD to try and stay alive, as Method NA has done the same pull, and Nerfclap jumps to the other side of the boss just to help a bit with the damage intake.
And like, watch out, he has Nerfclap dropped so low from having the Thorn Shaper barrage on top of him from the mini boss. You see the Thorn Shaper here also started raging as they stunned the Thorn Shaper to make sure he finished him off. And now they need to dispel the raging from the mini boss, as you saw the Soothe come out of JB. Now JB unfortunately didn't go into cat form as he got hit by these thorns, which is something you definitely got to watch out for, because you don't want to be stunned as a healer in this boss. Method EU, of course, 20% ahead as they pulled the boss earlier, but the trash percentage is still very similar. It's just 2% difference between those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, Method EU, they were, what, maybe about 10% on one sister ahead on the Triad boss, and now they're a good 25, almost 30% ahead of Method and A here. And, I mean, they're just slowly pulling more and more ahead. They've done, I don't want to say the exact same pulls, but pretty similar pulls worth of trash. So Method and A, Method EU, excuse me, just having a bit easier of a time grinding through, a bit more coordinated time, a bit higher DPS. Everything's just a bit better on Method EU side right now on this boss as they reach 1/4 health remaining on the Soulbound Goliath, 57% for Method and A. We know what's coming after this Nigura. We know that there's the preparation, of course, sub 60% in the Rawls Hall area, and then after that, they will, well, at least Method EU will, I think both teams will, proc their third reaping, pull it on the entirety of the trash of Rawl and Rawl himself.
Yeah, this point after this boss will be very important because it depends on which team can actually pull it off. Because it's just so much damage on the tank, it's so much stress on the healer to keep the tank alive, to keep everyone else alive, to have this perfect CC rotation of Ring of Keys, AoE stun, Vortex come in, to make sure once the mobs are raging, you actually CC them and the tank is not getting one-shot by all of them. And you also want to make sure that the DK delays the damage as much as possible, so the mobs are not raging for too long. So this pull is very dangerous, and we will see if both of those teams can actually pull it off. We saw Method EU do it, but Method A struggled a little bit with it in the past.
A little bit's an understatement. They had two full wipes on Raw coming back in as well, so Method A still needs to prove that they can do it. Only two teams that have done this successfully is Team D in the East, one of the Chinese teams 3 weeks ago now, I believe, and of course Method EU yesterday pulled it off as well, quite spectacularly. So we'll have to see if Method A this time is up to the task, as they've now finished off Soulbound Goliath, doing their own massive haul pull here and making sure that they're ready for that sub 60%. Method EU already working on this, downing that last enraged peasant and getting ready to set up their pull now. Really key to this pull is two things. One is to kill the mobs all at the same time so that the reaping spawns pinpoint and they potentially drop combat for a moment. And Xaylia needs to have a drink of mana right before they get in that Raw room.
Yeah, the problem here is Xaylia is actually dropping very low as there's a raging spit debuff on him. And now Xaylia needs to drink. Okay, so they're waiting a little bit here for Xaylia to get the mana back up. And now we're going to see this big pull from Method EU come in. They're waiting a little bit just to have the setup right, because this is difficult and they need to make sure everything is going perfectly. As now goes in, pulls all the mobs on top of each other, and they're not actually doing the pull yet.
They're not. But I'm equally excited as you are, Nigura. So Nerf Clap dipping just a bit low here on Method and A side. They're kind of rearing up to the same pull right now. 57% on the board for them. Method EU at 56%. They definitely have more than enough trash here needed to proc their reaping. And usually towards the end of this mob, they start to kind of kite and backpedal them right in front of Rawls Hall area. Not sure if they're going to do that this time. I really would be surprised if they all of a sudden switch strategies from a very supreme strategy that they had. Method and A kind of teetering on that 59%, 24 seconds on Bloodlust as they pull the presumably final mobs that they need before doing this pull. You can see Nerf Clap starting to slowly backpedal and kite towards Rawls Room, wanting to kill all those mobs at the same time, as if one of them dies kind of off beat of the other ones, they will spawn the reaping wave and then still be stuck with two of these Mastiffs. So very important that all these mobs die at the same time, as a huge chunk of damage comes in on Fragments and Mirrors, but able to be healed up quickly by Xaylia.
Yeah, those marksmen, just all of them raging at the very same time in the survivalist. You definitely want to make sure that you have a clean run here, as now we're probably going to see this pull as now uses his speed potion, pulls all those mobs on top of Raw. We see the Bloodlust come out, and now you got to watch out for Frag's DK damage. You just got to watch the damage readers, see if you can do the 1 million DPS again.
And Method and A answering on the other side right now. Both Bloodlusts are active. A lot of damage coming in on the tanks as Nerf Clap dipping so low. Huge amounts of healing coming out of JB and Xaylia right now. Huge amounts. Now dipping so low, 2%. Ring of Peace defensively goes down on the Method EU side as Method and A rears to the other side. Looks like Method and A is mostly cleaned up this pull, but Mirrors goes down on the Method EU side. Xaylia does not have time to battle res, and huge amounts of damage coming from the frontal from Rawl right now as Xaylia dips below the 50% mark. Needs a second to try and get Mirrors up right now, but there's so much damage coming in, and Xaylia hangs on at 4% HP, transforming into bear form and running around in circles as Fragments dips out from the swirly in the ground, and they manage to stabilize and get Mirrors up. Method and A pulls this off a fair bit cleaner and pushes ahead of Method EU on the Raw percentage.
That almost got into a disaster Method EU, that as Mirrors goes down, and Frag not casting the battle rest for so long. Xaylia was busy healing himself, healing the tank, and DK's have battle rests too, but it took him so long to get mirrors back up. Well, on the other side, Method and A just had such a cleaner run, but they're still struggling as they have those maggots here just casting the spit on everybody. You see the Grievous on all of them go out. Yoda actually dying as he does have cheat death available, and Lady dropping so low as well. As he goes down too. They do have 2 battle rests available, but JB is struggling to heal himself up.
Both battle reses come out right now out of Method and A, so it's just not stable on either side here. Another spit debuff on Xaylia right now as he just ends up healing the rest of that off. Now, of course, gets the cleave, the curse that immediately gets dispelled from the Rune Weaver from the kitchen. So both teams not really stable as Method EU has finally pushed their 4th Reaping Wave. It does come into the group. Frag DK just taking a bit of damage, nothing too significant as Method and A is now preparing for their 4th Reaping Wave. Here it comes right now. Rune Weaver is pulled from the kitchen as well, and they will be cleaving down some of the maggots, or did they already kill the maggots? There's no maggots with them right now, but they will be proccing their 4th Reaping on top of the boss, and if they don't, they're certainly running out of time to do so.
Yeah, so this is Method and A's way to get back in, as Method and A has 2 deaths, Method EU has 1 death, but they both managed to recover after having some struggle here in this pool. We saw the 1 million DPS actually come out of Shakib on Method and A's side. We saw Fragner actually doing a little bit less damage. They probably had less mobs, or the setup didn't really work out for him, but Method and A just ahead at this point. They finish up the boss, they have to kill the Rune Weaver, they will proc the Reaping, and they have some maggots left here too.
Yeah, so they're actually combining the maggots in the 4th wave of Reaping with the remaining health of the Rune Weaver, that Lieutenant style mob that just has so much health. She's only at half for maximum HP right now. EU finally downs Rawl. They still have to chew through about 30% of the Rune Weaver, actually exactly 30%. We just saw her enrage there. Immediate Dispel comes out of Xaylia as they look to down this, and then they will Shroud all the way downstairs past the other matron, not deal with any of that floor, and likely pull, as we've seen them do before in Agura, the trash on top of Lord and Lady Waycrest.
Yeah, so Method are actually mismatching their Reaping a little bit here as they proc the 80% after the boss, and they now have to single target or single this Reaping down without anything else. So it actually cost them a little bit of time here, and now they're the ones who are behind again. As Method EU proc the Reaping on the boss already, they only had to kill off the Rune Weaver, and they were ready to go down to this next boss fight here. They do both have 83%, so all they have left to do is the trash in this area and the horrors after this boss. So they don't have to do backtracking or anything like that.
And we know there's 2 really scary pulls coming out. They're going to pull all the trash, as we see here with Lord and Lady, not Lord and Lord Waycrest on Method EU. And Method is going to do the same thing, but then after we have that Gloom Horror pull ×7 on top of Gorak Tool, the final boss. So 2 scary combinations of pulls coming here. Good Ring of Peace coming down from Mirrors on Method EU to make sure that the mobs are bumped out of the warding candles on the ground. That reduce that damage intake by 50%. Bit of instability here for Method and A right now. They have to be careful of these mobs in rage, not only to heal up Nerf Clap, who's taking a huge amount of damage, but also to make sure that they interrupt the Soul Volley. That will do a huge amount of damage to the group. So well done by Method and A to stabilize, but Nerf Clap doesn't seem to be out of the woods just yet, as JB just cannot get himself out of this 4-stack right now with another spit debuff coming in on him. He's ticking down so low, and he goes down. They have no res right now. This is an absolute disaster for Method and A. They need to either reset the boss or just completely wipe it up, as we see Nerf Clap run up the stairs with a bit of debuff down to 1% right now. He dies on the way up as well, but Lighty manages to stay alive and get their res up. Method EU is now coasting as they get to 40% on Lord Waycrest, on Lady Waycrest.
You just see how difficult those pulls are. You saw Method and A just struggle so hard in phase 1 of the boss, while having all this AoE damage, having the Grievous stack up on everybody, and then all the mobs going to raging at the very same time while fighting the boss. Everyone just taking so much damage, and they're out of battle rests. They had to use both of them on Rel, while Method EU actually still has 1 battle rest left, and they have a Resolute and a DK, so 2 battle rests. Even if Xaylia dies, they can get him back up. Now, Method and A, this is going to be a disaster for them as they have to engage the boss fight again. They fortunately did manage to kill up all the trash, so it's only going to be the boss between those 2 teams, but still, it's a huge difference as Method and A is already in last phase.
Still, I do agree with that. I know exactly how you feel. 100% agree with it here, as Method EU trying to make short work of Lord Waycrest here, but really going for the more DPS optimal strategy of cleaving both of Lord and Lady Waycrest down at the same time and putting the couple to their final rest. Now, the dangerous pull coming in here, of course, will be the Gloom Horse plus Gorak Tool. Just immense amounts of tanks damage. Actually, we almost saw Method EU completely scuff this pull last time. Now did die at the end, and Xaylia managed to just last second res him as the rest of the mobs died. So hopefully they've cleaned that up just a bit.
Yeah, let's see if Method is just risking this pull again. Maybe if they saw that Method was wiping on the boss, then maybe they can just pull the horse without the boss. Let's see. Oh, no,
Nope.
they don't. So they actually engage the boss right here with the horse. Now we're going to see Salia jump on the ledge in the corner here to prevent the horse from jumping. But if they don't jump, what they're going to do, they're going to hit the tank for a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And as soon as they go into raging, it's going to be a problem. So they have to kill them immediately as soon as they're raging, and they have to use the AoE stun and their CC to make sure that nothing's happening.
And the problem is that Death Touch Slaver on the side from Gorak Tool spawned in. Nobody interrupted its Deathlands until the very end when Gingy ran over and gouged it, so it got a almost full uptime stun on someone, decreasing their damage by a fair bit. But finally the CC's coming out. Ring of Peace should be coming out here in just a moment to help out. Indeed, there it is, as now safely sits behind it. All the Ghoulhors, just how much damage they do as some of them leak into now. His shield wall is active. They have to kill these off by the time that shield wall expires, so they pulled this off perfectly. Now they're in the clear to just finish off Gorak Tool as quickly as possible. Still have 1% trash on the board, but they should be able to clean that up easily for the remaining reaping wave that should come up. Method has finally killed Lord and Lady Waycrest and will be heading over to Gorak Tool.
Yeah, this time a lot cleaner on this pull on Method use side compared to last time around where they actually had now die. They did manage to recover here, but there's the last four that comes in that they succeed in the back to be sure that they don't proc the last reaping wave because they don't want to deal with it if they don't have to. Now we see the CC actually breaking on this last four that is marked with a cross marker, and they just have it jump around here. So they want to kill the boss first and then deal with the horde, just making sure they don't get this last reaping wave. But yeah, it's just very clean run again by Method, only having this one death, this struggle on Ral where they did this huge pull. Otherwise, they still have a very good time. Not as fast as their time trial time, but still just very fast.
Still quite good as Method does the same dangerous pull. You can see a lot of damage coming in on the group, and all eyes on Nerf Clap right now as those last raging horrors are finished off. Looks like they're mostly slayable. The Ring of Peace finally comes down, but unfortunately, the half wipe on Lord and Lady Waycrest was just too much to handle.
Two of the grand finals.
So Method EU here on the last game that they would need to close out a perfect season in terms of not dropping a single series, Nagura.
Yeah, so one very interesting thing to note is that Shakib actually kept playing the DK. Well, we've not seen DK in MOTHERLOAD before, just mainly because of Sanguine. So if you have a DK, you just have so much initial burst and things die so fast, those low HP mobs like Laborers and stuff, and then you might not be able to see them properly and to typhoon them away from the Peacekeepers. So that's probably the reason why we haven't seen them so much, but Shakib now on DK, so let's see what they can do.
Yeah, but, you know, on the flip side, he has a grip.
Yeah.
Just one. Hopefully it's enough.
And with the Peacekeeper, though.
Yeah, that's very true. Method EU here at 3%, Method NA at 2% as they start rearing up. The fairly large pull that will get close to, if not proc their first reaping here, is Quaking Pulses on the group right now. We've mentioned it a million times. This is the nasty dungeon of the week. We just have a lot of residual damage on the team. Both Bloodlust popped right now. Just we got charges, we got Ice Spritzer going out, we got Grease Guns going out from the mech jockeys. We got an immense amount of tank damage. Tank constantly needs to kite around in circles. We have Quaking, Pulsing on all of that too, just making everything an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, you can see the Peacekeepers on Method and A side just starting to cast in. The Ring of Peace not actually being placed that well. You see the mobs are going to be dying very soon as Shakib just did so much AoE damage here. Now, we're going to see if they manage to not have the Peacekeepers being Sanguine, because if they end up being a Sanguine, especially in a pull like this where you use your Bloodlust for, you just lose so much time.
Yeah, the thugs here are quite low as well as Nerf Clap dips below 50% health. Some of these are going to charge out pretty soon as Inhale Vapors is interrupted on one of them, but not the second, increasing that physical damage done as well. So they have to make sure as when these are low to start kiting around or using that Ring of Peace or of course the grip or a taunt out. They have many tools at their disposal to make sure that you don't get the Sanguine under these Peacekeepers. That's really going to be the name of the game on who's going to start pulling ahead here at that 80% mark on the first boss.
Yeah, so we see the Peacekeepers, the last mobs to be alive, of course, as they have just so much more HP than everything else in this area. You saw Typhoon come out on the Thug here on Method EU side, and also a Rude right afterwards. So definitely Rasta Druids are very good to control the mobs that are not Peacekeepers. They have taunts to be able to taunt mobs away if they're low. They have Typhoon. They also have Root. So in case you Typhoon something out and it doesn't die immediately, you can just spam Root it until it dies, just to make sure it doesn't go underneath the Peacekeeper and drop the Sanguine there.
A lot of damage coming in here now as the first reaping wave that Method EU is dealing dealing with. Kind of splashes a bit of damage on some of the rogues and on Zaylia as well, coming in just before now gets that first T-clap off, but finally those reaping stacks are off of the majority of the group, and Zaylia is able to focus most of his dispels on now. Bit of damage needed, a bit of healing needed from the damage on the rogues as well. Doing well to interrupt all the ice spritzers, barely even seeing the debuff pop on the players before it's either interrupted or just hard CC'd for an interrupt. A bit of damage on Nerf Clap as well with Method and A. Flechette tick going out on the group, but they do manage to Typhoon it down and move out as Yoda unfortunately gets charged by one of those thugs and procs that cheat death.
Yes, no cheat death available for Yoda and his set, as both Frag and Gingy still have their cheat death available on Method EU set, but Method and A ahead in percentages if you compare the two trash percentages between those two teams. Now, one thing to know, okay, and there we go. So Method EU just killed those two Peacekeepers and got 6% of trash by killing them, so now they're head to head again. But in this dungeon, it really just matters how fast you can do the trash in this first area here, and then just not wiping later on. And we've seen both of those teams struggle a little bit and have those full kind of team wipes coming in.
Certainly the keys to success here are killing things fast and not wiping. I totally agree with that. Forehead. We get a big pull here coming from Method and A as they line of sighted, but Nerf Clap just getting so low right initially off the pull. The Peacekeeper, of course, starting to cast and be immobile in that area. Lighty going down with just a ton of the residual damage of these groups, just inevitable splash damage on that melee. The battle res has been used, not going to have that available again for about 6 minutes. The entire melee is vulnerable, probably not a lot of defensive CDs available, and of course the cheat death on Yoda not available either, whilst Method EU at 35%, moving quite well through the rest of this trash. Both rogues still have access to their cheat deaths as well.
Now the problem with these huge pulls is that, first of all, it's very hard to pull all of the mobs because it's scary for the tank. Not only when you gather them up, you have a bunch of laborers that don't have a lot of HP and they're not very scary at all, but when you engage with them, they will actually throw their wrench at you, and it does a lot of initial damage, especially if you pull a lot of them. So at the very start, when you pull them, it's going to be scary for the tank, and then once you did the pull, it's going to be scary for everyone else because of all the vendors, the thugs, and especially when you have a lot of thugs who just charge around randomly. If you get unlucky and 2 or 3 of them charge you at the very same time, you might as well just get one shot.
Too speaky for me, and just as you say that, Shakib actually gets charged by one of those thugs, dipping down to 60%. Mirrors dipping quite low as well, as Gingy gets some of the residual damage from the Method EU side here, dealing with their second round of reaping right now, plus a bit of extra trash, wanting to always be as efficient as possible, combining reaping with as much as they can handle. Grave bolts going off left and right here, but nothing too bad for them as they down the dangerous part of the second round of reaping. Kind of nasty pulse goes off as Zaylia gets charged at the same time and now dips quite low. Fortunately, Zaylia is able to catch up on the healing from the 3 thugs. That was a really poorly timed quaking. Nothing the team could really do about that plus charge combo, but Method and A, 46% right now, has killed off their second reaping, 48% for Method EU, and they're going to pick up some more.
Yeah, both of those teams so close in percentage at this point. Method and A on their way to the next pull as well. Now, unfortunately, one of the Peacekeepers healed a little bit on Method and A's side. Didn't heal to full HP though, so it wasn't too tragic. Well, Method EU pulling the next Peacekeepers. 3 Peacekeepers here, a bunch of thugs and some laborers. As you can see, the taunt coming out of Zaylia here on the left side, taunting this laborer away just to make sure that the Sanguine is spawning outside. So very well done by them.
Really well done indeed, as Method and A does that kind of weird skip that we saw earlier as well. They crowd control everything on the side there, and then they use a kind of combination of Shadow Meld to make sure that they only pull at least what they want here, majority of them being Peacekeepers, while clearing the trash before the coin-operated crowd pummeler, the first boss of the dungeon. Method EU now at 49% on the board, trying to finish off this last Peacekeeper. I think there's actually 2 of them in there, looking to proc their 60%, their third reaping wave. Now, we do know the kind of end goal of this is most of the teams will try to get that 4th reaping wave and drag that over onto the boss.
Yeah, so one thing to note here is that if Method and A is actually using this kind of... now actually dropping very low, proccing his trinket, but he did manage to recover after proccing his trinket, so Sally got him back up, but not going to be available to him for a long time as it is on cooldown. It's kind of like a cheap death mechanic as the rogues have as well. Now Method and A, as I wanted to talk about with the DK, now Method EU has shown this before. On the first boss, they were waiting for the Bloodlust to be ready and then pull a bunch of neutral mobs on top of the boss to be able to get this huge damage increase from the DK and just kill the boss so fast. Now we'll see if Method and A does this as well. Obviously we have Sanguine this time around, so it's going to be a little bit more risky.
Yeah, certainly risky. I think in the previous map they just ended up sticking to only the reaping wave and just trying to bolster Shakib's damage in that sense. We'll see if they decide to be a bit more aggressive, because they do know what their the opponents that they're up against right right now. Method and EU still working to kill the last of this reaping wave right now as they try to just pick up more trash as they go along. There's a few thugs and mech jockeys in here with one refreshment vendor on the side right now. Finally, the majority of the reaping dies off. Method NA has now procced their third reaping wave and are pulling it into their own respective trash. So definitely favor of Method EU here right now as they've already dealt with their third reaping wave. They're ahead of trash by 7% and they don't have a death on the board along with the battle res available.
Yeah, it just seemed like this kind of strategy that Method NA was doing right there, where they had the CC go in, got some of the Peacekeepers just hiding into the first boss room. It seems like it really isn't that efficient. Not only are you backtracking, but you also need to set up the CC, it needs setup time. And everything that takes time to set up, to kite around, to backtrack, it's just, it costs you overall. So Method EU just going ahead just because they're doing more efficient pulls at this point, and they're the ones who have almost 10% more trash here.
Yep, 10% more trash, and this should be enough trash here to proc their fourth Reaping Nagura, I'm pretty sure. Now, whether or not they do what we saw Fourty K do and try to rush ahead and drop it with a Shadow Meld by spawning the Reaping back here, because it's just not really as worth for them. They don't have that Unholy DK, so they won't benefit as much on the boss as would Method NA side here. So another Peacekeeper coming in here for Method NA. Hopefully their last pull for that fourth Reaping, it should be with 4 Peacekeepers in there, but that's going to take them a while to chisel through, while Method EU is now at 74%. Assassin Mech Jockey and of course the Refreshment Vendor about to die right now. Another good taunt away with the Refreshment Vendor, making sure it doesn't die on top. Assassin's about to go down too. There's the taunt from Mears on the side, making sure that the Sanguine under the Peacekeeper does not happen.
Yeah, we saw on Method NA side they also had a grip come out of Shakib to make sure one of those vendors doesn't die below those Peacekeeper. That would be a disaster for them because they have 4 of them. So if you have a Sanguine pool spawned below 4 Peacekeeper, that definitely costs you so much time. So Method EU, on the other hand, already engaging that boss here with their 80% Reaping Wave. They don't have their Bloodlust ready. I do believe we saw the last time of Method EU just them saving their Bloodlust and use it later on for a trash pull after this boss.
Yeah, either the trash pull or something combined with Azeroth. So certainly don't have that available for 80 seconds on either side right now. Method EU, though, already working on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, 83% on the board for that. They've already killed the 4th Reaping Wave. They didn't even try to skip it with Shadow Meld or anything. They just cleaved it right on top of the boss. Huge damage coming out of now, of course, we know the Protware tanks, but especially Fragments there with that massive rogue damage. And now well healing through the Static Shock from Xayah as he just, every opportunity he gets, he runs in, gets a bit of damage in cat form, heals the group, trusts that his HOTS, his healing over time will do the rest of the work, and then just goes back in for more damage. Method NA still sitting at 70%, finally now chewing through the rest of these Peacekeepers and getting ready to combine their 4th Reaping with the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler.
Yeah, this really just took them so long. Those 4 Peacekeepers, just everything, it's kind of taking so much longer than Method EU said. They were head-to-head at the start, and then as soon as it did this kind of CC thing and this Peacekeeper pull, they just fell behind. But now they're in 83% too. They're proc to 80% Reaping Wave, and they're on their way to pull the Crowd Pummeler. Now, they don't have their Bloodlust ready yet, but they want to use it on this boss, especially because of the Reaping Wave, because of Shakib, because of the Unholy DK.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking advantage of it now, but I mean, most of the damage has already come out by the looks of it. I don't know if it's worth popping that Bloodlust at this point. It still has 9 seconds on the board. Bit of scary damage there at the beginning, too. Yoda dipped quite low, and they just had a really bad quaking time with all of the mobs coming in at the same time. But here we go, another quaking coming in just after the static hit. So a lot of work cut out for JB to heal the team back up as they do indeed finally commit to their Bloodlust. A lot of damage coming in on the side of Method EU as well, as Xayah struggles to heal everybody back above that 20% threshold from the static hit.
Xayah actually completely out of mana as he was probably spamming Sunfire and Moonfire on the boss while he was throwing those bombs on top of the boss, just trying to get every single point of damage that he can on the boss. Now, this might actually cost him because he's completely out of mana at this point, and you see the dot on everybody just dropping everyone low. Now they have to kill the boss before the next static pulls because Xayah can't heal the people up at this point anymore.
Yeah, it should be okay though. I mean, they're at 4% right now. They should have no problem doing that. One last insult to injury quaking comes up as they will be able now to drop Fish Feast. Xayah will get all his mana back while the rest of the team heals up instead of waiting to be healed. But you're right, actually, they do end up getting the final static and unnecessarily proccing Fragments' cheat death there. So won't have that available for a while now as they rear up to do a fairly substantial pull, 5 pull probably with that Bloodlust available to them. Method NA still working away at coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, 27% on the board for them, but also 2 deaths.
Yeah, so they do the same pull as they did the last time around with the Bloodlust here, pulling 3 packs together, not pulling that Patrol and the other pack. They're just going to do that one later. But yeah, just using their Bloodlust here, making sure they deal with this. The problem is, once they drop low, once you have the Sanguine from those different kind of HP mobs, then you need to use your Ring of Pieces, and there's also just a lot of tank damage coming in from those.
Yeah, huge tank damage coming in, and huge tank damage going out as well, as now just collapses his way to victory there. Fragdance just surpasses him at the end. They only pulled 4 packs there, if I'm not mistaken, because they did not pull the Patrol here, consisting of a Sapper and an Earth Shaper, which they combined with the double Earth Shaper and Sapper just on the ledge above them. So another 7 mob pull here. Nothing too bad, and they had a bit of Bloodlust left over for that, so they got about 5-6 seconds of Bloodlust for the remainder of this pull too. Just need to make sure to interrupt those Rock Lances, and it should be no problem for the tanks, as Method and A has finished off the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, having a quick drink so JB gets his mana back. Everybody's nice and healthy, and they're going to do an aggressive pull as well, but they don't have Bloodlust available.
Yeah, they do have the DK though, so it's probably going to make up for not having the Bloodlust, as DKs usually do just huge amounts of AoE damage on those kind of pulls if he's got his cooldowns ready. Because DKs are, they need their cooldowns to be able to do damage, but as it seems like that he does have it ready, we see Nerf Trap actually drop very, very low as some of those casts go through and not being interrupted.
Yeah, the Rock Lance is so dangerous. He actually procs his Bonsomni's Bargain Trinket right now. Huge amounts of damage coming out of Shakib indeed, and not only did they do a no Bloodlust pull, but they did a 5-pack pull that Method EU only did 4 of with their Bloodlust, so very boastful pull here, and indeed carried by that unholy DK damage, but Method EU doesn't care as they've run up the hill now with that mass stealth and engaged Azarok, the second boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, so Method EU on 99% trash, so they only need to, either they're going to kill a rat right after this boss, or they're going to pull one of those elementals on top of Azarok at the very end. Now we've seen 2 teams so far already fail with this pull, where they wanted to pull an elemental on top of the boss, but they kind of social aggroed another pack with the mini boss in and they wiped it. We've actually seen it from Method and A as well. So we will see if Method EU just decides to play it a little bit safer, decides to pull this boss by itself, and then just later on goes ahead and pulls a rat just to get this last percentage. And Method and A, though, missing 4%, so they're probably going to have to do this pull.
The Method EU DPS rocking the rest of those Earth Ragers down and making sure to get rid of them on the fight, as Method and A indeed is at 83% on the boss, and you're right, Nigger, it has 96% trash, so they will probably once again attempt that same pull, as we see the Stone Fury being pulled here by Zayli on the side of Method EU. I believe they obviously only need 1 of them since they are at 99%, so they pull it up to Azarok, and we'll get ready to cleave that down with the boss when it's time. I believe Zayli rooted it in place. Yeah, he's casting Entangling Roots right now. Not sure if it's going to be on that or on the Earth Rage. It's actually on the Earth Rager, so one of them is paralyzed in the back. That's the trash mob they need for the Reaping, and the Earth Rager is, of course, Entangle rooted by Zayli right beside the boss as the team spreads out now for Quaking.
Yeah, I kind of like this. He pulled the mob whenever he had time to pull it, and now they're just going to see it until they want to kill it. So they're choosing it, pick and choose when they want to deal with this Stone Fury to proc their Reaping. Of course, they want to have the boss lower because they want to be able to Shadow Melt the Reaping wave off. So just going to keep his seat there in the corner, wait until the boss lower, then engage it, proc the Reaping. And now Method and A, they want to do the same thing, but they probably need 2 Stone Furies. I don't think 1 is going to be enough for them, so they definitely have to do something different.
Might even need some of the small spiderlings, the shale nail biters as we called them earlier. So definitely, and don't have really the time or the not the coordination, but the time or really the GCDs to spend constantly CCing all that many mobs. So they're probably going to pull it a bit later on top of Azarok and cleave it down with the rest of the boss, trying to combine it with their 5th Reaping and running down. Azarok, 15% here for Method EU and 32% for Method and A, as Method EU rears up to try and finish the Stone Fury. It has already been pulled, 50% now for the team, trying to kill everything at the same time so they can lightly just minecart right down the hill straight to Ruxa Flux Flame's platform and get ready to use that delicious Shadow Meld.
Yeah, Method and A not that far behind when it comes to boss damage and boss HP, but still 2 deaths on board of Method and A, while Method used 0 deaths so far. Very clean run by them. 100% trash. They did Shadow Melt off the Reaping Wave. Actually, maybe they didn't Shadow Melt it yet because they need to skip the trash here and then Shadow Melt the trash plus the Reaping. As we can see them just run through here, now going ahead, just getting aggro from all the mobs. And once everybody is through, they are going to use the Shadow Melt. It's kind of have a double skip, Reaping plus the mobs, and then they're going to be ready to engage the boss.
Yeah, so at this point, it's just Tyrannical boss, 2 in a row here for Method EU as they drop the majority of the Reaping. One of them does sneak in a bit. It's marked with a skull in the back, as you can see. It just comes over. It's not a substantial mob eater, not a lieutenant style mob. It's actually actually from that Stone Fury that they pulled on top of the boss. They just couldn't outrange it in time, so no problem for them. They'll just be able to easily cleave it down, as chemical burns do go out on the tank and the healer here now. Was not able to spell reflected, so just has to kind of eat the damage. Xaylia will heal him through it. Method and A now, actually, they didn't pull the Stone Furies in the end. I guess they just didn't want to try that again after the disaster in the last one. So they ran down to the R&D wing and are dealing with some of the weapons testers there and the Mastermind. Then they'll be right at Rix's platform as well.
Yeah, interesting to see a pull here in the R&D wing. The only other team we've seen to do with these affixes was Learn to Fly. Learn to Fly did a bunch of different pulls here in this dungeon and seemed like it wasn't very efficient because it slowed them down so much. But Method and A only has to pull one pack, while Learn to Fly actually had to pull a bunch more. Now Method and A procs their 100% Reaping Waves too. They're gonna go ahead, do the same thing as Method EU, just go to the boss, have JB actually going down. This is a big problem because JB needs to die closer if he wants to get a rest. So this might be a disaster for Method and A actually.
Yeah, it's actually really disastrous because the Masterminds do have True Sight, so he can't just kind of kiddie form and prowl back to the rest of the group. Hopefully they've made it over to Rix's platform. It looks like a lot of the mobs are running back, but JB's already worried about the Masterminds making their way back now that the rest of the group has reset them, so he might need to end up just dying by himself and hopefully getting a res from Lighty as needed. But seems he's found his way around the edge where there are no Masterminds present and is able to get back to the group without needing to die yet again. But a lot of time lost here as he needed to die res and actually did die in the end, so not sure if that's in Rage of Lighty. They'll have to see. Nothing but problems here for Method and A as he releases and has to try again. Method EU cleanly going through Rixa Flux Flame down to 23% now.
Oh no.
Oh no. Boom goes the dynamite.
Anyway, Method EU just all the way on the boss already. 0 deaths on their side as Method and A is still just trying to get JB back. This is such a huge problem for them as they also have the Reaping mobs here just getting into combat. The problem is, I mean, they do have a rest on Lighty, right? They have the Monk who has the rest, but JB needs to be closer. He needs to be 40 yards range and he also needs to be line of sight. So this is going to be a problem for JB just to be able to get back. I feel like the whole team is just going to suicide now and get back to help him out because he's just not able to get in rage and die there. So Method EU already down Rix at this point. The only thing between Method EU and winning the 3rd cup is the last boss.
Yep, so Lighty, Nerf, Clap have indeed self-killed and released at Azrok's platform, run over to JB to help him out with those Reaping mobs, and as a triplicate unit will be running over to get to the Rix's platform, something that Method EU has already accomplished. 0 deaths on the board as they heroically charge up the hill, trying to avoid as many of the True Sight from the War Machines as possible. They will sneak by here. Now will likely pull the War Machine to the side. It did see him as they run up the platform and will be shadow melding all of this aggro off.
Yeah, so once the Shadow Melt here, of course, you don't need to kill any more trash. They only have to kill the boss here. Now, they still have 2 minutes cooldown on their Bloodlust, but it should be coming back up at the very end of the phase, as this boss takes quite a while, especially in the tyrannical setting. Now, you do have the first phase, which lasts until 50%, then intermission phase, and then the last phase when the boss comes back down again. You gotta watch out for Xaylia here, as he's gonna get all of the missiles, because they only target ranged, or they favor ranged DPS, and he's the only ranged in their group.
Yep, so Mogul Razdunk 83% right now. Method and A has finally completed their great adventure and gotten over to Rix's platform right now, ready to pull it. One last insult to injury. Quaking does come out on top of the team, but they do manage to feast up and will be pulling the boss at this point. They are, of course, an entire boss and quarter behind of Method EU. So Method EU has everything in their cards right now to win this and really just have a completely perfect season in terms of not dropping a single series.
Yeah, that was a very risky charge coming in by now here from Method EU, as he charged into a missile and he charged into a Gatling gun, but he did manage to survive as he's a Prod Warrior and he's pretty much immune to damage at this point. And now we see Method EU, they're on 66% on the boss, on 50% he goes into the intermission phase. We see the Quaking come out. Now Quaking can be dangerous on this fight because sometimes you really want to be stacked, especially when you dodge the Gatling gun, when you dodge the missiles. So if you get a Quaking in a bad timing and you have to spread out, maybe someone actually accidentally gets hit by a Gatling gun or gets hit by a missile.
Mogul Razdunk 55%, about to have his transition phase right now for Method EU. We'll have to deal with the 2 Sky Scorchers. Nothing, obviously, that they haven't seen or done before, nor that we haven't seen either. So it should be pretty easy for them to deal with that. Method and A still working away at Rixa. Everything seems to finally be going in their favor, but, I mean, just that that skip just didn't work out for them. Even at that point, they were falling a bit behind. I'm sure Sarah's going to talk to us about a bit about that once we get there. But they were just falling slightly more and more behind. They started the first boss late. They started Azrak even later than that. They did what is, in my opinion, not as efficient of a trash route. Of course, they were going to the R&D wing instead, Nagura, of pulling some of those Stone Furies.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Method A already was behind, even when that happened, right? So they had 2 more deaths compared to Method U, 0 deaths, and they were also behind just in general on trash percentage, on boss HP. So even with this disaster, if Method U just cleans up this whole dungeon with 0 deaths and without any trouble on this boss, then no matter what Method A would have done, they still would have won just because the route of Method U was better and they just played it cleaner. Now we see Frag actually dropping the cheat death here as the boss goes down to trigger the last phase. They do have the Bloodlust ready. Thankfully, Rogues just have cheat death and they don't die whenever something happens to them. Anyway, they use the Bloodlust here and all they have to do is melt the boss as he's on 40% HP.
40% HP and dropping quickly here as they're halfway through their Bloodlust. Rix of Flux Flame at 12% for Method and A. Hopefully they're going to kill that before Method EU finishes off the last boss here. Looks like they will, but 30% on Mogo Razdunk, and you know, I think the cheat death proc was just kind of for showmanship there. I'm sure Nagura, of course, it wasn't an accident anyway.
Of course. Now we see Method EU 20%. The boss is about to go down as they still have a little bit of Bloodlust. That of course you can see all of the DPS just melting the boss. The boss is dropping lower and lower and lower, and this is going to be such a clean run for them to win this 3rd cup, right? Having 0 deaths in this meta load in a very difficult dungeon with Sanguine. Just people have been complaining about this dungeon with the affixes on Twitter for this whole week, basically. So Method U just having 0 deaths here, just playing so well.
And of all people, they've constantly tweeted how much they hate this dungeon, so it's a very fitting way for them to finish it up, and that's exactly what they'll do here as Mogul Razdunk hits his final percentages of health, and Method EU cap off a perfect season, not dropping a single series as they win the grand final in West Cup number 3. Though we'll be seeing them in the 1st seed.
That's right, and the points earned for this cup based off of their own placement. Method EU taking that crown, a prize of 140 points here, times 3 for their total standings here. And at this point, you know, all the rest of the points are going to be especially relevant for the global finals later in the year, so it's very important to watch out for that one. But at this point, Eastern region coming in, we have a couple teams that are going to be competing for